According to Larian Studios, Cleric is the least played class in Baldur's Gate 3, and Githyanki is the least played race. Today's protagonist is Twilight Eclipse, a war domain cleric with a beautiful head of real Githyanki hair that is real. What is a Githyanki, you ask? They're little green guys from space. Our story begins aboard a Mind Flayer ship, where Twilight Eclipse is being held hostage, with a brainworm behind his eye. When the Nautilus accidentally flew into hell, Twilight Eclipse seized the moment to escape his pod. Like a double espresso on a Sunday morning, he made his way effortlessly through the sphincter. In the next room, he encountered a man with an exposed brain that started talking to him telepathically. It was like the time I went to Basingstoke and I saw—
The exposed brain quivers in expectation. You realize you're talking to an intellect devourer. A minion of the Mind Flayers who abducted you.
Okay, that's new. That's fine. This video is a collaboration now. Even if that does make me feel a bit insecure about my artistic ownership of this video. Twilight Eclipse crushed the talking brain in his hands because that's what his character would do. In the next room, another Githyanki appeared behind a fleshy outcrop. She leapt through the air and offered a traditional Githyanki greeting.
Abomination, this is your end.
It was love at first sight, and Lae'zel met Twilight Eclipse's eyes with a longing stare. The two Githyanki celebrated their new partnership by killing some imps.
Damn you! Get me out of this damn thing! Don't waste time on Istik. We must go. If you leave me, I'm dead. Please!
Lae'zel had a point. They did need to get going. The two Githyanki made their way through the sphincter and encountered some American football mascots who were really going at it. Then a dragon showed up, and everything went black. Twilight Eclipse's body washed up on a strange shore. He had died doing what he loved. Oh, no, he's alive. Twilight Eclipse was relieved to realize that his hair was perfectly in place. Not that there was any risk that it wouldn't be, but it was a relief nonetheless. Further along the beach, Twilight Eclipse encountered Shadowheart, the elf he'd abandoned on board the ship. A strange psychic connection between the two of them revealed that Shadowheart was a bigot.
Distrust, hostility, because you are Gith.
Twilight Eclipse bravely challenged the loathsome elf and was killed. Hold on, that doesn't sound quite right. Let me read my notes again. Here we go. Twilight Eclipse saw Shadowheart on the beach, but his psychic connection revealed that she was a rude bigot, so he left her to it, and Shadowheart ran off to buy a copy of the Telegraph. In the wreck of the Nautilus, Twilight Eclipse put down two intellect devourers. These creatures had presumably just finished wiping out 5 or 6 level 1 parties, as is their way. Next, Twilight Eclipse encountered the roguish Astarion.
In the grass. You can kill it, can't you? Like you killed the others?
Thankfully, this little scuffle did not disturb our hero's perfect and real hair. After introducing Astarion to Githyanki diplomacy, Twilight Eclipse realized something. He and Astarion were connected by a psychic bond. With both their lives at stake, Twilight Eclipse followed his heart, and so began a healthy friendship based on mutual trust.
All right. I accept. Lead on.
They found a Mind Flayer nearby. H.P. Lovecraft would have a hard time describing it, but I'm better than him. It had tentacles on its face and weird eyes. They looked at the squid with disdain and battered it. Elsewhere, Lae'zel, aka Bazel, aka Manic Kithrak Mean Girl, was being held captive. Twilight Eclipse intimidated her captors, who fled in terror. It was incredibly romantic. Her eyes were like pools of festering pond water. Her hair was so credible. Her nose was upturned like that of a politician visiting a pub. They heard a commotion nearby and looked on as a party of goblins attacked a magical grove. Twilight Eclipse could not help but admire the goblins' tenacity and desire for conquest and glory. His admiration was interrupted by the arrival of a man who radiated protagonistic energy.
Provoke the blade and suffer its sting.
Is it too late to make this whole video about Will? Yes. The goblins were promptly and decisively wiped out, as is their tradition. Inside the magical grove, tensions were running high.
We was running for our lives. Please, you were begging me to open the gate. Anything to save yourself, you coward!
As a war domain cleric, Twilight Eclipse had no time for weakness, so he zoned out while the tiefling waffled on about druids. He wondered how he would get the worm out of his brain, and whether the tiefling found his hair convincing. Will the warlock was teaching a child the basics of combat. Twilight Eclipse intervened to tell him his efforts were in vain, and for about half a second went full Grinch. Will explained that he was hunting a devil called Karlach.
An archdevil soldier I swore on my good eye to kill. She's out there now, preying on the innocent. I don't kill her, she'll leave behind nothing but a trail of corpses.
Twilight Eclipse thought Karlach sounded kind of based, but he agreed to help Will out in exchange for Will joining the team. This was the worst decision Will would ever make. The bigot Shadowheart was also at the camp, pondering her orb. She explained that she wanted to be left alone, which was why she was sat in plain view fondling a magical artifact.
This grove is the home of the druid Halsin. Apparently he's a reputed healer. He could probably help us. If only he hadn't gone missing.
Twilight Eclipse was done humouring the lesser cleric, so he left her to her performative loneliness and exposition dumping. Within the grove, the druid leaders were deliberating what to do with a child who had tried to steal a magical artifact. Twilight Eclipse did not want to get involved. There were, he reasoned, two sides to every story. It was like a trolley problem, where he could either let the druids imprison a child without trial, or intervene and make a whole thing out of it. Ultimately, the child tried to run and was killed by a snake. Twilight Eclipse took solace in knowing this was not his fault. All things considered, the parents took the news quite well.
That snake! That... Ah!
Later, Twilight Eclipse and Lae'zel bullied a tiefling to get more information about a Githyanki creche.
The tiefling was clear. If there are Githyanki west of here, that must be our objective. Purification cannot wait.
The logic was sound. Finding the Githyanki would solve all of their problems. After leaving the grove, the party encountered travellers along the road. As they approached, they discovered
A strange symbol glows marked on their flesh, and something within you stirs in response.
That's what I was going to say, yes.
A
A shiver ran across his mind and the parasite writhed in his head. The whole situation got out of hand and the ensuing fight ended predictably. The dead dwarf had a parasite in his head too, which bonded with Twilight Eclipse. It thought he was a cool customer. Lae'zel expressed her admiration for Twilight Eclipse.
When I come near, your odor alone is enough to make my neck sweat and my hairs stand on end.
Same, he replied, but about you. The mood in the camp was immaculate. Everyone was saying how great of a guy Twilight Eclipse was.
I'm not easily impressed by people, but you're stronger than I gave you credit for.
Perhaps we're uncommonly fit.
Video games really do appeal to the male fantasy. Lae'zel was in a sentimental mood and started talking about astrology. Twilight Eclipse didn't mind because Githyanki are totally into that. And then this YouTube video stayed monetized. The following morning, Twilight Eclipse barely managed to intimidate a little dog to let him pet it. Then the party encountered a mysterious dead animal. Astarion insisted it wasn't worth looking into, and Twilight Eclipse agreed. It was boring. In a building surrounded by dead gnolls, the party found a group of wounded priests. They overshared that they, like Will, were hunting down the devil Karlach. Then, their leader made a huge mistake.
This is the sword of justice, blessed by Tyr. I've wielded it since I swore my oath.
Lae'zel really liked her new sword. The party leveled up. Will leveled up so hard that he broke his little profile picture. Very mysterious, Will. God, he's cool. Not far away, the party found the devil Will had been looking for. It turned out, however, that she'd actually had a really bad time in hell. Karlach was a misfit and she belonged in the team, despite Will's initial hesitance. Not much later, they encountered the Githyanki patrol, who were giving the locals a warm welcome.
Are you straight from the creche, wandering unbidden? And in the company of local vermin? Explain yourself, Vinisk!
Twilight Eclipse wasn't sure how to respond to the questioning, so he told the Gith commander that he would kill his non-Gith companions later when they ceased to be useful.
Your lips spill falsehoods! You have taken on the soft, cowardly ways of this world.
Then the Gith slaughtered Twilight Eclipse and his whole party. Wait, no, that's a mistranslation. Let me try this again. Twilight Eclipse wasn't sure how to respond to the questioning, so he lied and said that Will and Astarion were his prisoners.
Your lips spill falsehoods!
That still doesn't sound right. Twilight Eclipse decided the Gith party had bad vibes, so he turned and ran the other way. The party backtracked to the beach the Mind Flayer ship had crashed on, and Astarion tried to pick a lock. Next, a hand appeared out of a magical portal, and Twilight Eclipse did the first thing he could think of.
A hand? Anyone? Ow! Perhaps I should have clarified? A helping hand? Anyone?
As he pulled the wizard out of the wall, Twilight Eclipse was struck with a profound sense of hatred. The wizard waffled on smugly, not even thinking about how authentic his hair looked and how visibly it sprouted from his scalp. Twilight Eclipse drew his sword, ready to strike.
Really don't want to do that. Not a threat. Just an observation.
In a desperate attempt to save face, Twilight Eclipse left the wizard behind on the side of the road. He had enough loyal companions already, he reasoned. Wrongly. In a nearby ruin, some rapscallions were arguing about what to do with the crashed Mind Flayer ship. When Twilight Eclipse asked if he could have some loot, they responded by being really mean.
What's wrong with his face? Freak? Dead freak? Get him!
Our hero made a mental note to never give anyone the benefit of the doubt. Ever. Astarion failed to pick a lock again, perhaps employing weaponized incompetence so people would stop asking him to do things. The party eventually made their way in by jumping through a hole in the floor and set up camp. There, Will was accosted by his demonic patron because he hadn't killed Karlach like she'd asked him to. His punishment for being a total flake was growing a set of horns.
Warlock pacts tend to be unforgiving from what you know of them. Will was lucky he didn't face a more severe punishment.
Yes, it definitely could have been worse. She could have shown him his future, which would have been unfortunate. After resting, the party walked confidently into a tomb and Will triggered an explosive trap. No, hang on. After resting, the party saw a tomb with bad vibes and left it alone. Astarion finally managed to pick a lock and the party stumbled across a mysterious book. Punching the book did not prove helpful, but then Twilight Eclipse remembered he was a cleric.
You have a sense these are names, a list. But of what?
Sadly, he wasn't a very good cleric. After pressing a button, Twilight Eclipse watched in horror as the dead came back to life. It was like Night of the Living Dead, or Dawn of the Dead, or Day of the Dead, or Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. It turned out Lae'zel was very good at re-killing skeletons. After the fight, the party found an amulet that lets the wielder speak to the dead. This was, of course, worthless. You might as well find a hat that lets you speak to failures. A floating corpse emerged from a sarcophagus and began speaking in riddles.
What is the worth of a single mortal's life?
Twilight Eclipse's usual methods didn't prove fruitful in this case. The corpse said something cryptic about meeting again and then wandered off like a senior citizen who just finished recounting his life story in Tesco. Back in the sunlight, some would-be adventurers were mourning the loss of their friends. Twilight Eclipse gave their leader some pointers about personnel management. In exchange, the leader warned Twilight Eclipse that there were goblins around. Walking confidently into the next town, the party was surprised to find there were goblins there.
Don't bother running! My archer's got decent aim and plenty of arrows.
Twilight Eclipse ordered the goblin leader to stand down. The reply from the goblins was immediate and painful. Will came in clutch here by using the shatter spell to break every bone in their little goblin bodies. He also threw one of them off a roof, which was very funny. Then he did it again, and it was even better the second time. Further into the town, the goblins had tied a gnome to the arm of a windmill. This is objectively one of the funniest things goblins have ever done. Nice one, goblins. When the goblins tried to get Twilight Eclipse involved, however, the fun had to stop. Lae'zel took one swing at the goblin leader and he surrendered and handed over his prized axe. I wonder what he's up to now. After unplugging the windmill, Twilight Eclipse went to talk to the gnome. The gnome looked through him, as if there was something he didn't believe about his Githyanki saviour. A few more minutes on the windmill might teach him a lesson. Never mind. That night, Twilight Eclipse awoke to catch Astarion in the act.
Shit. I wasn't going to hurt you. I just needed, well, blood.
There, in the dim firelight, you see him for what he really is. A vampire, a slave to sanguine hunger.
Astarion's tenacity could not be mirrored, but Karlach was happy to step over the threshold and take up his old position in the party. Back on the road, the party encountered 3 ogres, one of whom was a loquacious logophile, thank you Google.
I have eyed yet another prize. Fortune favours our bellies.
Among the dead ogre's possessions was a tiara that makes you clever. As soon as Twilight Eclipse put it on, he realised killing Astarion might have been a bit rash. Up the road, the goblin camp lay in wait. Twilight Eclipse walked in confidently, as was his way, and was surprised by the warm welcome he received.
Easy, lads. We got a true soul coming through.
As the party attempted to cross a bridge, their minds were filled with cryptic exposition about shadowy figures and the like. Classic D&D. Any DM who says they haven't used shadowy figures to set up a plot is a liar, and they probably make you spend a full action to drink a potion, the nerd. The squad were rescued by Shadowheart the Bigot, who just happened to be there totally by mistake.
You're lucky I managed to catch up with you when I did. We're both lucky.
Shadowheart explained to the party that they needed her and they needed her magical artifact. She was half right. The artifact chose Lae'zel as its new protector, which felt like a bit of a snub to Twilight Eclipse, but he did have complete access to everyone's inventory anyway. Now inside the goblin camp, Twilight Eclipse pushed the limits of his royal welcome and told a tough-looking goblin to kiss his foot. Surprisingly, it worked. This was his kind of crowd. A goblin sorcerer said she could remove Twilight Eclipse's brainworm, so he followed her into her private quarters, alone.
Drink this. It'll purify ya.
You recognize telltale flecks of werejackal blood. It's a potion of sleep.
He knew what it was, but these goblins seemed so nice that he drank it anyway. It was a trick. You can't even trust goblins anymore, is nothing sacred. Twilight Eclipse ripped those chains apart like a corgi tearing into an unsupervised rug. He gathered the party and taught the goblin priestess a lesson. Once you cross a gith, that's pretty much it for you. It turned out the real boss of the goblins was a drow called Minthara.
If the inhabitants do not realize you are the knife at their throats, we can use that against them. Go to their refuge and make your way inside. As a friend.
Twilight Eclipse realized too late he may have just joined the bad guys fighting for a god he didn't believe in. Karlach had some notes.
Whoa, soldier. What did you just do?
Twilight Eclipse proudly explained they were going hunting for heathens, which didn't go down very well.
You may serve the Absolute, but I don't, alright? I don't!
That night at camp, Twilight Eclipse was feeling unwell.
I see it in you. I feel it in me. We are lost. I will be quick with my blade. First you, then the others, then myself.
He'd come this far doing everything Lae'zel told him. Why stop now? Okay, maybe that isn't canon. Let's rewind a bit. Karlach had some notes.
Whoa, soldier. What did you just do?
Twilight Eclipse didn't call anyone a heathen, and while Karlach was annoyed, she didn't leave. Instead of letting Lae'zel kill him at camp, Twilight Eclipse looked into her mind and found she had a fear of having no clout and turning into a squid. I'd never considered this, but it's something I'm quite scared of now as well. Our hero then slipped into a dream where a magical woman told him he should put even more worms into his head. To you or me this might sound strange, but Twilight Eclipse was wearing the tiara of cleverness. It all made perfect sense. He had a few spare parasites in his pocket, so he popped them into his brain. This, he reasoned, was a great idea. A new day dawned on the Druid Grove. Little did its inhabitants know that a confused Githyanki cleric with literal brainworms was about to turn their world upside down.
Gods above, you're alive. A little light, just as the day seems darkest.
Dramatic irony is a literary technique in which the audience knows something that a character does not. Will was off screen, but he still had something to say about this deception. He defected from the party and joined the Tieflings, which, while fair enough, was quite hurtful. Lae'zel wasted no time and killed him in one turn. So fell the Blade of Frontiers. Fashionably late, the goblins arrived. As a way of greeting them, Karlach belted a tiefling off the wall into the waiting mandibles of a scary spider. Lae'zel finished off the tiefling leader, and the goblins made their way into the grove. At this moment, while I saved the recording, Karlach ran over and informed Twilight Eclipse she wanted nothing to do with him. I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was something like, "I'm not doing this anymore, you weird little green creep, what the hell is wrong with you? I should have left you at the goblin camp and I wish Lae'zel had cut your throat for some reason." Now it was just Twilight Eclipse and Lae'zel, two Githyanki bravely fighting alongside goblins and massacring civilians who weren't even fighting back. Maybe Will and Karlach had a point. Following Minthara's orders, the gruesome twosome attacked some druids and were slaughtered. Oh wait, no, that's an earlier draft. They used Mage Hand to activate a lift and sneak up on the druids from behind. Wiping out the casters gave them the advantage they needed to wipe out every last resident of the grove. Hooray. It is worth considering that this last druid is the one who had that child killed by a snake earlier. This is a moral grey area. Maybe two wrongs can make a right if both wrongs are really, really bad. That night, Twilight Eclipse turned down Minthara's advances at camp, went to sleep, and then woke up when Minthara tried to kill him. He tried to intimidate his way out of the situation, saying she wasn't tough enough to do it, and then he died. Is that right? That doesn't sound right. That night, Twilight Eclipse turned down Minthara's advances at camp, went to sleep, woke up when Minthara tried to kill him, and then tried to persuade her to stand down. And then he died. No, he didn't. That's not right. That night, Twilight Eclipse did not turn down Minthara's advances at camp, went to a creepy temple, discussed battle tactics or something, attempted to delve into Minthara's deepest fears within her mind, got caught, went to sleep, woke up when Minthara tried to kill him, and died. Why have I written down so many bad endings? This is the one. That night, Twilight Eclipse did not turn down Minthara's advances at camp, went to a creepy temple, discussed battle tactics or something, did not attempt to delve into Minthara's darkest fears, and then she said,
I would have you by my side in Mensa Berenzen when our work on the surface is done.
Twilight Eclipse had a funny feeling he would die if he didn't go along with this, so he did, and said they should go and see the Absolute together. And that's how Twilight Eclipse and his beautiful, authentic Githyanki hair ended up joining a cult. Once the goblins had left and the party was over, Twilight Eclipse had time to think very deeply about what he had done. Pros, he had a dog. Cons, he was in a cult, he'd been ordered to go to the Shadowlands, and he was almost completely alone. The first thing he needed to do was to rebuild his adventuring party. Twilight Eclipse's pet corpse told him that he could hire people who had died and force them into loyal servitude for an indeterminate period of time. The price for this deal was 100 gold, which is how much a magnifying glass costs, or 4 books. Twilight Eclipse reluctantly agreed to this extortionate price and summoned 2 new loyal sort of undead helpers. Sinazith was a Githyanki monk who had mastered the 4 elements, air, water, fire, and TBC. Sir Fuzzalump was a rock gnome wizard who insisted on only learning conjuration spells and also mage armor because he's not an idiot. He also had a cat called Fine Familiar. Twilight Eclipse had a new team with a new catchphrase.
This vessel is at thy disposal. Do what thou wilt.
Once he'd popped a fresh parasite into his brain, Twilight Eclipse announced a few new rules. Rule 1, my last party was frequently waylaid by pointless ethical debate. Rule 2, to avoid this we're going to be heroes henceforth and rescue damsels in distress and so on. As luck would have it, a gentle old lady was being harassed just outside their camp. Bingo, said Twilight Eclipse, which out of context was a strange thing to say. The band of heroes slaughtered the bandits and rescued the old woman.
Such heroic deeds deserve proper thanks.
She invited them to come and visit, and Twilight Eclipse's heart soared at the prospect of being added to her will.
You feel like you're being watched.
Twilight Eclipse did his best to ignore the feeling that thousands of strangers were judging his every move and continued on his way.
The sheep's voice warbles. You realise it's trying to say bar. The sheep stares at you with unsettling malice.
Twilight Eclipse had never met a sheep before, so he interpreted this behaviour as normal, which it is. Near Ethel's cottage, Twilight Eclipse found a man with impeccable facial hair and less than impeccable opinions about the elderly.
Her kind have hidden among us since the first darkness, and their knowledge is matched only by their spite.
Twilight Eclipse intimidated the man, demanding to know why he was really there.
I hunt a vampire spawn called Astarion. I'm bound to bring him back to Baldur's Gate, alive.
Twilight Eclipse had no idea what this man was talking about. He'd spent a moment admiring Ethel's cottage before popping in for the latest gossip. It looked like Ethel's granddaughter was visiting, which made Twilight Eclipse's inclusion in the will all the less likely.
If it isn't my hero! You took ages. Come in. Eat up, Mayrina. I won't say it again.
The vibes were immaculate. She was like the grandmother he'd never had, right down to the thinly veiled threats.
Keep your own little nose in your own little dish, Petal.
When Ethel offered to remove his brainworms, Twilight Eclipse said he needed to go and lay an egg or something and ran off. Nice as Ethel was, he wasn't going to let her anywhere near his head and the natural blonde roots that presumably sprouted from his scalp. On the road, the party were approached by a very smug caricature of a British man that was difficult to not take personally.
It looks like a Githyanki, but it speaks like a beast.
The sneering gentleman teleported the party to a utopian vision of a National Trust site where there are no red ropes and you can sit on all the chairs. There, Twilight Eclipse pocketed a roast potato, while Raphael revealed his true form.
How dear is one's soul, really?
Twilight Eclipse had never heard a rhetorical question before, so this entire exchange was baffling to him. Raphael offered to help with the brainworm situation, and again, Twilight Eclipse had to politely refuse. In a buried chest nearby, the party found a die that claimed to be the hue of heroes. Sadly, there were only 3 bottles, so the new colour scheme was given to Twilight Eclipse for being the leader, Lae'zel for being tough, and Sir Fuzzalump because he looked sick in pink. The party looked heroic and united, except for Sinazith, who looked terrible. Up the road, a cackle of gnolls were gathering outside of a cave, and the party moved in to wipe them out. Sir Fuzzalump summoned a cloud of daggers. Taking control of the gnoll leader's mind, Twilight Eclipse ordered the creatures to feast on the meat in the cave. Tragically, the meat was actually people, who the gnolls quickly tore apart. Our hero bashfully stepped into the cave to explain that there had been a misunderstanding.
Its host will feast on gnoll flesh to control the hunger.
Before long, only the gnoll leader remained. Twilight Eclipse ordered her to eat herself, and normality was restored as he failed catastrophically. Inside a strongbox, the party found a peculiar glowing flask. Recognizing hair tonic when he saw it, Twilight Eclipse immediately popped the cork. Wait, I got that bit wrong. Let's rewind a bit. Twilight Eclipse easily deduced that the flask was inhabited by a terrible monster, so he held onto it. Chekhov's flask, he murmured to himself as he put the flask in his pocket. Since he was treating heroism like a checklist, our protagonist was delighted to notice that a nearby inn was on fire. He daringly charged into the inferno and rescued a Welshman who was stuck under a wooden beam. Annoyingly, the man's wife was dead, so he forgot to give Twilight Eclipse a proper reward, like a magical sword or 53 gold for instance. Desperately craving validation, the Githyanki hero charged into the mouth of hell once more. 4 warriors were standing hopelessly on the first floor, unable to find any way to rescue their boss. Assisted by the power of 6 brainworms, Twilight Eclipse found a delicate and surprising solution to their problem.
Come! I'm afraid proper thanks must wait.
Weirdly, the counsellor went straight to Lae'zel, who had been waiting outside, and thanked her for doing nothing. Apparently, a Grand Duke had been captured. Lae'zel astutely observed that nobody asked, and told the counsellor to clean up her own mess. The counsellor was impressed with how based Lae'zel was being, and gave Sir Fuzzalump a new staff as a reward. Then, Twilight Eclipse emerged from the burning building and let everybody know that he was fine. The party headed towards the mountain pass and were disappointed to learn that the Githyanki patrol was still skulking about. When the Kithrak called Sir Fuzzalump
local vermin,
our hero stood up for the party and called them his comrades. This went down terribly. Let's try that again. Twilight Eclipse told Sir Fuzzalump to sit the conversation out. He tried being really polite to the other Gith, but it turns out they hate manners just as much as they hate gnomes.
Pathetic!
No, this is the one. Here it is. Twilight Eclipse decided the Githyanki patrol had bad vibes and he ran the other way. The party wandered into a nearby hut and were ambushed by a sneaky wizard. Twilight Eclipse entered his mind palace, which he's been able to do this whole time, and figured out the password to enter the den of thieves. The thief leader demanded to know why the party were there, and Twilight Eclipse politely explained that the Githyanki goes where he pleases. The thieves had kidnapped a painter who explained his predicament.
You need to buy me. You were rather quick to agree, but all the wiser for it.
The painter's owner was asking for the extortionate price of 1,000 gold for him. That's the equivalent of 10 magnifying glasses or 40 books. Twilight Eclipse tried to haggle him down via intimidation, but that didn't work. Somehow the party didn't have 1,000 gold between them. This would be problematic if they ever needed to burn 10 ants at once with magnifying glasses, or purchase all 48 Mr. Men books. Twilight Eclipse went to ask the thief leader for work, and she explained that 2 of her colleagues were missing. They were supposed to be delivering a shipment. Images of the 2 men in the cave being torn apart by gnolls filled Twilight Eclipse's mind, and he fought hard against the urge to smirk. He offered to return the magical flask, but it turned out that taking it in the first place was against company policy.
You've bloody killed us all. Damned if I won't return the favour.
Lads! Kill him!
The fight began with everyone getting set on fire. Then, Sir Fuzzalump summoned a cloud of daggers. Sinazith used airbending to knock someone off a cliff, which was very funny. For no discernible reason, the painter decided this was the moment to join the fray. Sir Fuzzalump did not see this and accidentally blew everything up, including the painter. Not only was this decidedly unheroic, it also robbed the Forgotten Realms of a portrait of Twilight Eclipse, and his very plausible hairline. Further into the camp, the party sent Find Familiar to check if some mines were live. Mercifully, they were not. After defeating the last of the criminals, the party prayed they would find some good loot. Thankfully, they did. As they were leaving, Twilight Eclipse thought it would create some much-needed levity if he ran into a wall, but instead he went right through it, discovering a secret lift. The lift lowered them into the Underdark, an alien and hostile world full of unspeakable horrors. A labyrinth where death lurks around every corner. An endless cavern that only the most depraved beings call their home. Said Twilight Eclipse. We should make camp here. That night, Twilight Eclipse dreamt of his mysterious Githyanki guardian, who told him to go to Moonrise Towers. Twilight Eclipse responded that this was old news, and Minthara was already meeting him there. He advised the Dream Guardian to get her finger back on the pulse of current events. Then he played fetch with his dog. It was a new day, probably, who knows, they're underground. The Underdark was a gloomy, hopeless place, like the inside of that Jack Will's shop on Guildford High Street before it closed down. As they set off into the Underdark, the party encountered some Minotaurs, who were no match for a cloud of daggers from Sir Fuzzalump, supported by Lae'zel hitting them with her sword. Half man, half bullshit, quipped Twilight Eclipse, but nobody laughed. One of the Minotaurs had been wearing an amulet of the unworthy, which the rest of the party affectionately gave to Sir Fuzzalump, the first domino in a series of events that would end in a very uncomfortable HR meeting. Up ahead, another Minotaur was killed to death by some statues. Unsure whether the trap was still armed, the party sent in Sir Fuzzalump's cat to find out. It was still armed. Opting for an alternate route, Twilight Eclipse discovered a sword sticking out of a stone. Remembering that he was a cleric, he had a bit of a think and decided that blood sacrifice was the only way forwards. Luckily, he was right. His new sword could sing, which was a fun gimmick, but sadly, it only knew a copyright-free performance of Star Spangled Banner. This is terrible, thought Twilight Eclipse. That doesn't make any sense. How would it? Before long, the party encountered a village of mushroom people that shared a common consciousness. I know what you're wondering, and no, there was nothing fun about these guys. They filled Twilight Eclipse's mind with a vision of his own dead body, which went down very poorly.
The Sovereign is threatening you.
That night, Twilight Eclipse and Lae'zel stared longingly into each other's eyes.
You suspect you won't be getting much sleep tonight.
That's not actually true. Twilight Eclipse always slept well because he had a clear conscience and has never made a mistake. After a long and peaceful rest, Twilight Eclipse found a poisoned gnome on the ground. He cured her, and the ungrateful gnome started rattling off how other rock gnomes needed help too.
If you were to free my kin, we can pay. We're Iron Hand Clan, best artificers in Baldur's Gate.
It was obvious that the pink armour was having the desired effect. He looked like a hero, and now he was starting to feel like one. The gnome gave Lae'zel some boots she'd stolen from a Dwergar captain, presumably so that the party could return them. At an abandoned fishing village, the vibes were decidedly off. The party sent Find Familiar to investigate, and he confirmed that everything was fine. The cat was wrong, though. There were actually a bunch of Dwergar there waiting to ambush the party. It was a bit of a mess, but Twilight Eclipse was quickly learning that he was untouchable. He literally could not be killed. Things just always worked out for him. Even Find Familiar's initial failure to assess the threat was forgiven when it dealt the finishing blow to the leader of the Dwergar ambush. The party leveled up, and Twilight Eclipse learned the spell Spirit Guardians. Lae'zel also learned to attack twice in one turn. It's over for our opponents, Twilight Eclipse declared. It is over. I am infallible. I have no flaw. The term hubris cannot be applied to me. The validity of my confidence has been peer-reviewed by a panel of former enemies and current corpses. In the Dwergar camp, Twilight Eclipse fell victim to a devastating insult.
I ain't parleying with more twat souls.
And hurried to find the leader of the group. After returning the Dwergar's boots, Lae'zel was walking around in bare feet, much to the delight of Quentin Tarantino and approximately 10% of my viewers.
Finally! You must clear rubble, spilling poison.
A true soul called Nier was apparently stuck after a cave-in and needed to be extracted via explosions. The gnomes confided in Twilight Eclipse that their friend was probably hiding nearby, with plenty of explosive powder. It was really an ideal situation. Twilight Eclipse could rescue the gnomes, as promised, while also freeing up a member of the cult he was still kind of wrapped up in. While looking for this explosive powder and its owner, the party was set upon by sentient slime. It was like walking into a kindergarten during flu season. They found Philomene ranting and raving.
I swear to Iron Hand, one more step and a blow us to chunks.
Twilight Eclipse called her bluff, knowing full well that she wouldn't follow through with it.
And let it be done.
Small correction, Sinazith teleported behind Philomene and shoved her away from the powder, preventing her from Twilight Eclipse persuaded Philomene that you only get one life and if you waste it, it's all over. No, I've got it. He defeated her with logic by saying she'd already be dead if he wanted her dead. That's what he said, first try, and then he got the rune powder vial. Smashed it, lads. Once the collapsed wall was sufficiently exploded, Nier emerged. He was resplendent. He killed all the gnomes with his mind. He killed the Dwergar captain with his mind.
True soul, take their heads. The Absolute commands it.
Twilight Eclipse knew he shouldn't go along with this, but there was something so refreshing about receiving clear, direct instructions for once. Also, all the gnomes were already dead, so it's not like anyone would know he could have saved them. It was a glorious battle. Sir Fuzzalump summoned a cloud of daggers. Twilight Eclipse summoned his Spirit Guardians. Sinazith pushed an enemy into the cloud of daggers, which was very funny. Nier got pushed into the lava, which was far from ideal. Made this whole fight a bit pointless, in all honesty. Then Sinazith got pushed into the lava and melted to death, which was even more sad because she wasn't even that evil, really. Saddest of all, there was no way to reach Nier's corpse and retrieve his brainworm. Rest in peace, little prince. You would have loved Twilight Eclipse's heavily populated skull. Sinazith was easy enough to revive, but Nier and his worm were lost for good. The only thing left to do was inform Thulla that all of her friends were dead.
They're dead? I'm alone? No. I should have been with them. Should have died with them. Leave me.
It was a bit of a downer, in all honesty. Despite his best efforts, Twilight Eclipse's foray into the Underdark was a complete waste of time. It was time to go and talk to the Githyanki patrol. Sir Fuzzalump was gently informed that his presence in the upcoming discussion was not required.
Ryder, my time is short. Lead me to...
Such a familiar tone.
Lae'zel initiated negotiations to great success, and the Kithrak told them he was searching for a powerful weapon. "Oh, do you mean this one?" asked Twilight Eclipse.
Halfwit!
This did not go down well at all. The Githyanki patrol had forgotten to consider that Twilight Eclipse and his party were an unstoppable green tide. They wiped out the Githyanki patrol with such ease that they didn't even notice that Sir Fuzzalump had forgotten to join in.
How dare he speak our queen's name? How dare he dishonor her children?
Twilight Eclipse reminded Lae'zel that the other Githyanki had only been following the orders of an evil Lich Queen goddess. Some harm, no foul. A Githyanki fidget spinner informed Lae'zel of the exact location of the Githyanki creche, and Twilight Eclipse felt reinvigorated with a new sense of purpose. Also, Lae'zel got a new sword. Good for her. As the party surveyed the monastery which housed the creche, Lae'zel began to vibrate with anticipation. Nearby, a charming old lady was reading a book.
I left your stupid creche while you're still chasing me. I don't even want your bloody eggs!
Nearby, a rude old lady was ranting about eggs.
I need a Githyanki egg, which I know may sound a little unsavory.
Skaketh! You would steal away one of our children!
Having eliminated the Githyanki equivalent of the child catcher, the party made their way down to the monastery. On the way there, they wiped out some drunk lizards and they bodied some weird cats. On the roof of the monastery, they even dealt with an entire bloodline of troublesome eagles. Now nobody will ask any stupid questions about why we don't use the eagles to get to Moonrise Towers, thought Twilight Eclipse, sagely. Lae'zel rules-lawyered her way into the creche by explaining that she had read the rules, and the rules said that she gets to have her brainworm removed.
The faithful may be purified. This is Vlakith's protocol.
Twilight Eclipse stared longingly at a painting of Vlakith. I wish there was a painting of me somewhere, he mused. Sadly, such an opportunity had never presented itself. In the infirmary, Twilight Eclipse spotted several unused brainworms. Bingo, he said, which out of context was a strange thing to say.
A Eulitharid skull refashioned for cleansing. The Zaithis. Purity at long last.
Twilight Eclipse wasn't too interested in sitting in the purity chair, but then Lae'zel started going on about it and the FOMO kicked in. He explained politely that he gets to go first because he's the boss. While comfortable to sit on, the magical seat made Twilight Eclipse's brain hurt a bit.
The machine lashes out aimlessly. Your right temple burns, then numbs. Part of you is gone. A part you can no longer recall.
In an instant, Twilight Eclipse forgot how to skim stones, how to juggle, and how to prevent or survive a monkey attack. The whole experience was deeply unpleasant, but Twilight Eclipse persevered, knowing that Lae'zel was probably super jealous right now. He attempted to surrender entirely to the machine and complete his purification. Sadly, he was so bad at surrendering, because he never did it, that he accidentally blew up the machine.
The Gustil tampered with it. Traitor!
Lae'zel decided there must be a conspiracy going on, which is an understandable response to a minor setback. Since the Doctor had left the party unsupervised in the lab, Twilight Eclipse quickly popped 3 worms into his brain. It became clear that the Doctor had no intention of letting them go, and the party would have to fight their way out. This was their preferred modus operandi anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. The party went to tell a Githyanki Kithrak that there was treachery afoot.
Sharlak, among us?
She replied by saying that she heard Twilight Eclipse had a powerful weapon. I'm not falling for that one again, thought Twilight Eclipse, and he told her he didn't have it. This led to another big fight in which Sir Fuzzalump summoned a cloud of daggers. After leveling up, Sinazith finally unlocked the 4th element, breaking people's bones with magic. The Githyanki Inquisitor didn't seem that impressive at first. He didn't even have control over his own follicles. It was quite impressive, however, when he summoned Vlakith, the queen of all the Githyanki.
You carry what is mine. Do I call you loyal servant or thief?
He corrected her, pointing out that he was technically a hero. He was about to list a myriad of examples proving this when Vlakith explained that there was an enemy inside the astral prism, and that Twilight Eclipse needed to go and kill them. Inside the prism, he met his Dream Guardian, who failed a charisma check to stop herself from getting stabbed. She reloaded a save and told Twilight Eclipse that Vlakith was actually going to kill the whole party once they were finished inside the astral prism. Twilight Eclipse told Lae'zel about this, and she agreed that it was probably not true.
My queen knows my faith. She would never condemn me.
The Queen has spoken. Your death is decreed.
As he battled off the Inquisitor and his goons, Twilight Eclipse realised that the Githyanki's reputation for random violence might be somewhat warranted. Lae'zel was having a bit of a crisis of faith because her God Queen had tried to have her executed. It was a betrayal roughly equivalent to watching over 10 minutes of a YouTube video without subscribing. Twilight Eclipse took off the headband of intellect. His raised intelligence had brought him nothing but misfortune. He replaced it with the circlet of psionic revenge because it was sparkly and had a pretty gem in it. Brimming with a fresh sense of despair, the party left the monastery, hoping that they might enjoy happier times in the Shadowlands. The party were ambushed in the night by Githyanki ninjas. Thankfully, they weren't there to kill anyone, they were there to ask for help killing a god.
Lae'zel, together we will break our chains and be Vlaakith's slaves no longer.
This heresy! I will hear no more of it.
Lae'zel didn't take this idea very well, but then she got over it and agreed to help. The Shadowlands were oppressively gloomy and bleak, and there were shadows that killed you. It was like that one episode of Doctor Who where they go to Basingstoke. Twilight Eclipse watched a goblin trick a hyena into running into the shadows and dying. He threatened the goblin to make them go and check if the shadows were dangerous for non-hyenas too.
No! No!
Twilight Eclipse used a lute Minthara had given him to bust out a well-known Githyanki tune and summon a guide. A Drider emerged from the shadows and offered to guide the party to Moonlight Towers. He seems like a credible fellow, thought Twilight Eclipse as he tried to figure out which part of the creature's head it was polite to make eye contact with. They were ambushed on the road by some presumably bad guys, but it was all fine in the end because all the good guys survived. Upon arrival at Moonrise Towers, the Drider scurried up the wall and presumably ended up stuck in a bath somewhere. Inside the tower, Ketheric Thorm was, for some reason, insistent that he needed pictures of Driders. He was also sentencing Minthara to death for incompetence, even though her defense was airtight.
If I had been given drow warriors instead of goblin trash! Mercy! Please!
Bye-bye, princess.
There is a time and a place for Schadenfreude, but that time and place is not in an evil tower in front of a celebrity voice actor.
Tongues of psychic flame lap at the memory of the goblins dying by your hand.
I see you like to handle underlings physically. So do I.
After an unsuccessful attempt at seduction, Twilight Eclipse shared his mind with Ketheric Thorm's main underling. She showed him how if you trust in the Absolute enough, you can make someone's head blow up. Then, she said that Twilight Eclipse needed to go and find a relic. Not wanting his head or hair to explode, Twilight Eclipse agreed to get going. He just had to run one little errand first. Following a trail of blood and screams, the party discovered Minthara in the dungeons, getting tortured to death. Using his proficiency in intimidation and the thaumaturgy cantrip to gain advantage, Twilight Eclipse confidently ordered the tortucutioners to step aside. When that didn't work, he broke Minthara out of prison the old-fashioned way.
I didn't think anyone would come for me.
Using Fine Familiar as a distraction, the party snuck their precious cargo out of the prisons of Moonrise Towers.
I thought I had found a home and a purpose. Now I leave as an exile.
Minthara was having a crisis of faith, but Twilight Eclipse had already seen one of those today, so he started thinking about himself instead. Minthara was technically a damsel. She had also, technically, been in distress. She had also, without question, been rescued from a tower. At last, Twilight Eclipse was demonstrably a hero in the eyes of the law. Minthara had a plan on how to push the party's heroism to the next level.
We must eradicate them. Starting with General Thorm. Tomorrow, we go to war with the cult of the Absolute.
It was time for Twilight Eclipse to stop being in a cult. It was time for Twilight Eclipse to stop a cult from being. The first step to bringing down a cult is choosing exactly 3 companions to assist you. Upon reviewing his options, Twilight Eclipse welcomed Sir Fuzzalump back to the party, and told Sinizith that her place was here, in camp, doing nothing.
I have encountered few Githyanki in my life. Meeting you and Lae'zel makes me wish I knew more of your culture.
This was convenient because Twilight Eclipse had agreed to destroy the god of Githyanki culture and needed some backup.
Did you have anyone particular in mind?
Minthara got changed into something less spidery and dyed it pink. It was her first step away from a life of tyranny and towards a life of heroism. Nearby, a metaphor for greed demanded the party hand over all the gold they were carrying. Twilight Eclipse had learned by now that offering people what they asked for tended to end in violence, so he skipped a few steps and attacked. The toll collector's armor was impenetrable, but so was Twilight Eclipse's strategy, so it was a fair fight. This whole encounter probably concealed a deeper message about the consequences of hoarding wealth, but Twilight Eclipse had never encountered figurative language before, and if he had, he wouldn't have liked it. He let Minthara keep the toll collector's mace because she was new and had missed out on lots of opportunities for collecting loot in the past. Then he wrenched open a large safe and discovered a single piece of gold lying within. Perhaps appearances can be deceiving is a thought that did not occur to him. Down the road, the party were ambushed by shadows. According to official lore, shadows are especially drawn to creatures untainted by evil. Twilight Eclipse was aware of this and interpreted the ambush as a ringing endorsement of his previous decisions. Sir Fuzzalump summoned a cloud of daggers and Lae'zel pushed someone into it. The old ones are the best, said Twilight Eclipse about Sir Fuzzalump. After pretending to read a series of plaques, Twilight Eclipse accidentally opened a secret passage. Inside a hidden temple, a trio of statues tested his intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Twilight Eclipse was relieved that he wasn't being tested on anything difficult, like how to skim a stone or how to survive or prevent a monkey attack. In the next room, he found a bloody altar and a ritual dagger. This was obviously a prize of some kind, so he pocketed it. At the same time, for unrelated reasons, a group of undead knights attacked. The party quickly dispatched their enemies, and then Twilight Eclipse accidentally stood in acid for too long and fainted. After regaining consciousness in camp, Twilight Eclipse gave the ritual dagger to Minthara because she was new and had missed out on lots of opportunities for collecting loot in the past. Minthara said thank you by talking about how she desperately wanted revenge against the cult she accidentally used to work for. She said she had once been the Absolute's dagger, which didn't sound right to Twilight Eclipse. While Minthara was quite pointy, daggers were not usually blue. That night, the Dream Guardian returned and started taking credit for how nobody had transformed into a Mind Flayer recently. That's completely irrelevant, said Twilight Eclipse. What a pointless dream this is. The following day, the party got an uneasy feeling when they saw a pair of yellow eyes peering out of the floor. Twilight Eclipse immediately drew his sword, which belted out a copyright-free rendition of Star-Spangled Banner. The whole team were overwhelmed with confidence and vigor, except for Find Familiar, who was banished to the Shadow Realm. Once outside, the party stared stoically into the distance as they considered the shadow curse that surrounded them. Specifically, they considered why that inn over there was protected from it and shrouded with ethereal light. On the way to the inn, Twilight Eclipse was ambushed by a brood of larval clowns who had not yet developed their adult plumage. Thankfully, Twilight Eclipse was not scared of clowns because he had real problems. If anything, he found them pathetic and desperate, like all performers.
You there! Step forward and keep your hands off your weapons.
Twilight Eclipse explained that he didn't answer to sentries and demanded to speak to someone more important.
Shut up!
The sentry led the party to Jaheira, who made sure everyone knew she was a druid. Before Twilight Eclipse could finish describing how he would eradicate Jaheira's entire bloodline in a single turn, she produced a brainworm which squirmed with excitement as it detected the growing colony behind Twilight Eclipse's eyes. Jaheira was about to make the second biggest mistake of her life when a true soul in disguise intervened.
Hold on, Jaheira. I think I know this one. If you want to survive this, then trust me. One true soul to another.
Twilight Eclipse had never seen this man before, so he immediately revealed his secret to Jaheira. Then, he told her that she needed to relax because he wasn't even a cultist anymore. When this didn't work, he showed her the astral prism.
What in the hells is that thing?
Twilight Eclipse had expected Jaheira would try and kill him when he showed her the artifact, but instead she offered him food and a place to stay.
Come join me for a drink. You may just be the godsend we've been praying for.
He sensed that this was the beginning of a long and prosperous collaboration, but that was a mistake. The second step to bringing down a cult is shopping. Lae'zel bought some new armor and dyed it pink, the hue of heroes, and green, the color of skin. Twilight Eclipse bought a cape and dyed it to match Lae'zel's armor. It was like a cute couple's costume, except nobody was cute and they weren't sufficiently in love to give each other buffs. In the inn, Jaheira spiked Twilight Eclipse's wine with truth serum.
You perceive a faint hint of cloth grass, a herb that is said to elicit the truth.
This was unnecessary, as Twilight Eclipse had never lied and didn't have any secrets. Jaheira started lecturing the party about how Ketheric Thorm used to be dead but stopped doing that in order to become everyone's problem.
It seems he is no longer mortal. He has become, in fact...
Twilight Eclipse explained that he didn't care whether he could see Thorm or not. He would find him and kill him. Upstairs, Twilight Eclipse explained to the True Soul that he had a magical artifact that resisted the Absolute's influence. Fist Marcus did not take this news well.
You're not one of us. You're an abomination.
This was quite insulting until Twilight Eclipse discovered that being one of us would mean being a hideous ghoul that killed people with dark magic. He could live with this, which was something else that separated him from the ghouls. After the fight, Jaheira and Isabel mistook Minthara for Twilight Eclipse.
You're meant to save us all, I believe? You can walk among the cult unnoticed.
Meanwhile, Twilight Eclipse was slotting another worm behind his eye, making him even more charming and mysterious. In a nearby room, a man was stubbornly refusing to die. Twilight Eclipse charmingly suggested stamping on the man's head to free up valuable bed space.
Please, that isn't helpful.
Slightly embarrassed at being called out like this, Twilight Eclipse pretended to care for a minute before concluding that this man's sickness was at best irrelevant and at worst selfish. That night, Lae'zel crept over to Twilight Eclipse while he was asleep, signifying she was either trying to kiss or kill him.
A parasite grips my mind. My own people hunt me. But I am gnawed by an even greater torment. You.
She asked Twilight Eclipse to prove his commitment to their relationship via single combat. This is apparently how Githyanki resolve all disputes. Working in customer service on the astral plane is probably exhausting. Lae'zel began the duel with a critical miss, provoking our hero to charm her by channeling brainworm magic. He then froze her in place with magic, which apparently violated some sort of rule that Lae'zel had neglected to mention.
Not Lae'zel.
Twilight Eclipse generously helped Lae'zel to her feet, and she wandered off without comment. When Twilight Eclipse followed her and asked for a kiss on the cheek, Lae'zel explained that she didn't enjoy public displays of affection.
I won't be guilted into indulging your whims. I have my limits, and you will respect them.
This rejection would have hurt the average man's feelings, but Twilight Eclipse's mastery over his emotions was absolute. He was also missing a large chunk of his amygdala due to the parasitic worms eating his brain. He channeled any lingering resentment and anger into his work. At a local hospital, Twilight Eclipse pretended to be sick, but was informed that he should have contacted them at 8 AM if he wanted an appointment. He told them that he'd been busy at 8 AM and demanded to be seen now. When this didn't work, Lae'zel took matters into her own hands. Further inside the building, some sort of pirate professor was giving a lesson on vivisection.
Let us cure you.
The last time someone had offered to cure Twilight Eclipse, a surgical chair had exploded and he'd been forced to slaughter an entire Githyanki creche. He politely declined. In the ensuing scrap, Sir Fuzzalump summoned a stinking cloud that prevented opponents from taking actions. Then, Minthara ran in and used her bonus action to prevent the Doctor from attacking anyone but her. Since they were both in the stinking cloud, it became impossible for him to attack, so he just skipped his turn instead. Just a cute little combo I wanted to share. Felt clever when I did it. Moving on. The party reached level 7, and Sir Fuzzalump learned the ability to summon this guy. Twilight Eclipse wondered what Sinizith was up to back at camp. In a nearby morgue, they found an amulet that lets its user summon black tentacles out of the floor. Twilight Eclipse gave this to Lae'zel, making a mental note to check in with her later for the inevitable reward that would follow his public display of affection. After passing through the morgue, Twilight Eclipse found another cape, which she gave to Lae'zel. Ever since Twilight Eclipse had started wearing a cape, they'd become incredibly fashionable across Faerun. Imagine if Taylor Swift started wearing Crocs everywhere. It's a bit like that. The capes were so trendy and cool that a nearby school of Kuatoa tried to get their hands on them, or fins. Unfortunately, their fighting style was too inefficient, so they were easily slaughtered. They couldn't deal with the sheer scale of the party's power. Lae'zel almost felt guilty about battering so many fish, but Sushi got over it. Back at camp, the hirelings were staring at a wall, as is traditional in their circles. Twilight Eclipse asked Lae'zel for a little kiss, and she again rebutted him. Understandably, Twilight Eclipse decided to visit a local bar for some much-needed romantic advice.
Clank! Go back down, wet your whistle. Tell your story. You and I both. To our good health.
Twilight Eclipse didn't want Lae'zel to think he'd gone soft, so he downed the suspicious pint in one. This will impress her, he thought, wrongly.
Now tell me the story.
Twilight Eclipse began to recount his whole life story, but having just finished his first ever pint, this was not as easy as it sounded.
I am dulled. You are dullard.
Next, he told the bartender the secret routine he underwent every day to preserve his majestic and real mane of blonde hair.
Lies of a lying liar. Let void take you.
The ensuing fight was very confusing and nobody knew what was going on, and then the bartender spontaneously erupted his insides all over the floor and fell over, exposing himself to everyone in the bar. In British culture, this would generally be considered a good time. The bartender had been taught a lesson about trust, and Twilight Eclipse was about to ignore a lesson about moderation. He was brimming with confidence and felt a strong urge to prove himself, ideally via a gauntlet of challenges, preferably underground. The third step to bringing down a cult is triumphing over adversity. After enduring an unsolicited poem from a passing British stranger, Twilight Eclipse told him to stop waffling and get to the point.
Listen here, Pipsqueak. Do not underestimate this opponent. At best, you will have the blink of an eye to strike.
Ignoring the stranger's warning, the party decided to delve too greedily and too deep. After hitting buttons at random, they uncovered a magic disc which lowered them gently down to the Gauntlet of Shar. Twilight Eclipse had encountered one of Shar's clerics before and assumed her trials would be just as easy to defeat. While he was no stranger to minor setbacks, even when facing impossible odds, Twilight Eclipse was getting a headache, so he turned off the lights and discovered the Shar worshippers had stupidly written a solution to the first trial on the floor. In the next room, some skeletons had forgotten that they were dead and tried to boss the party around.
You upset my plans. Leave.
You have awoken the shadows.
Rally on me. A wall of bone and blade against the darkness.
Twilight Eclipse was not in the habit of taking orders from failures, so he didn't offer any help. Then, the party easily wiped the floor with Shar's pathetic excuse for followers. Twilight Eclipse took a quick breather on a bench until the walls stopped spinning and the party continued on their quest. Further into the temple, they found an Orthon whose freedom had been stolen away by a musical contract.
Spill all the blood sworn to the night. Silence all prayers. Smother each rite.
Twilight Eclipse explained that the song was terrible and told the devil to kill his followers so they wouldn't have to hear it anymore.
This ends now.
The fight against the Orthon and his horde was simple and largely uneventful except for Sir Fuzzalump burning to death. Twilight Eclipse brought the Orthon down by making its brain explode, and then the party spent a moment paying their respects by Sir Fuzzalump's charred remains. Then they remembered they could revive him, so they did.
This vessel is at thy disposal. Do what thou wilt.
He seemed fine. In the next room, Twilight Eclipse found a spider carcass and decided to give it a lick.
The meat tastes of rot and sour milk. Your stomach lurches, but your loins tingle.
There was something subtle, almost evasive, hiding in the meat's taste profile. Twilight Eclipse decided to get to the bottom of it. It turned out that the secret ingredient was poison, and Twilight Eclipse promptly fainted. This is pretty much how I would feel if I drank a whole glass of milk. Although Twilight Eclipse had recovered from the poison, he was still very drunk, so decided it was time to get some rest. That evening, Twilight Eclipse had a heart-to-heart with Sir Fuzzalump. "I'm sorry for letting you get burned and exploded to death," he said. "That was a mistake." Then he asked Sir Fuzzalump if he would like to buy some merch, which somewhat undermined the apology. The following day, a necromancer had the audacity to question Twilight Eclipse's hairline.
Though it's not all natural, is it?
Further into the temple, they found an altar that required a blood sacrifice. Twilight Eclipse explained that his skin was too thick and calloused to be penetrated, and ordered Sir Fuzzalump to take one for the team. This was quite brave of Sir Fuzzalump, because wizards have about 6 hit points, and some of those are just for show. Twilight Eclipse changed into his pajamas and effortlessly evaded Shar's sentries. He unlocked the final gate and completed the trial without any trouble at all. He viewed stealth as a boring waste of time and hoped the next trial would provide a suitable challenge. Fortunately, he was not disappointed. 4 powerful enemies laid in wait in the next chamber. Evil Twilight Eclipse, evil Lae'zel, evil Sir Fuzzalump, and Minthara. Lae'zel quickly cut down 2 opponents, then Twilight Eclipse used a Mind Flayer version of Counterspell to disintegrate evil Sir Fuzzalump. He then wrapped up the encounter by shooting himself in the head. Lae'zel confessed that she found this latest victory to be profoundly alluring.
Soon, I would know you again. Not to claw you, but to caress you. Not to be burned in your heat, but to be bathed in your warmth.
Seeing this softer side to her was a bit of an ick. The next trial was a simple task that was almost impossible to fail. The next trial was designed to be impossible, but Twilight Eclipse was an impossibly gifted hero who expertly navigated the invisible platforms and retrieved the orb. After battling through a library, they encountered a puzzle that required reading. Twilight Eclipse often described reading as structured daydreaming and felt it was beneath him and a waste of time. He got Sir Fuzzlelump to tell him which book was the right one to use. Behind a hidden door, Twilight Eclipse found several pieces of Shah-themed merch, which would have probably excited a lesser cleric. Twilight Eclipse didn't need a spear, he had a singing sword. The party arrived at the final barrier in their path and realised they were missing an orb. They then spent 30 minutes of real time searching around to try and figure out which orb they'd forgotten to pick up. Eventually, they realised that because Twilight Eclipse hadn't offered his own blood at one of the trials, the orb had not been added to his inventory when he grabbed it. This seemed somewhat arbitrary to Twilight Eclipse, who made a mental note to complain about it to as many people as possible. Twilight Eclipse told Sir Fuzzlelump that he should never have interfered by offering his own pathetic blood. He put the wizard on a performance improvement plan for the foreseeable future. Wading into mysterious water, Twilight Eclipse was flushed away to the Shadowfell. When he woke up, he wondered whether this was a suitable reward for collecting all those orbs. Frankly, the whole situation felt like a downgrade. There was a mysterious woman shackled nearby who was apparently the source of Ketheric Thorm's invulnerability.
The Spear of Night could be meant to sacrifice the Night Song. But are you the one supposed to wield it?
Twilight Eclipse ignored the other narrator's negativity and had a go with the spear. This was the second time Twilight Eclipse had stabbed a mysterious woman in a strange place full of floating rocks. It didn't work last time, and it didn't work now. He couldn't find a way to leave the Shadowfell without freeing Aelin, so he pretended that had been his plan the whole time. He also explained that stabbing her with a spear had been a joke. If she didn't find it funny, that was her fault for not understanding dark humour. The fourth step to bringing down a cult is annihilating its leader. Now that Ketheric Thorm was no longer... The party rushed to Moonrise Towers.
This is it. The spearhead moment. You brought us this far. So how shall we proceed?
Twilight Eclipse told Jaheira to trust him and follow his lead. He had something special planned that would bring Ketheric's forces to their knees.
We will avenge the fallen!
Before the fighting began, Disciple Zrel had time to squeeze in a quick monologue.
You have betrayed me. You have betrayed General Thorm. You have betrayed our god! And in death, you will all serve the Absolute.
I will never serve the Absolute again. And I will take your tongue as a reminder of this moment.
Twilight Eclipse grasped a red bottle tightly in his hand. Chekhov's flask, he whispered, before unleashing a spectator into Zrel's waiting minions. The spectator then proceeded to provoke a series of opportunity attacks and accomplish nothing of note. Lae'zel, on the other hand, killed 4 cultists in one turn. Perhaps beauty lies not in the eyes of the beholder, but in the action surge of the fighter. Disciple Zrel showed off her brainworm powers before being sliced to ribbons by Jaheira. With Zrel defeated, the balance shifted in favour of the heroes. The assault on Moonrise Towers was a flawless victory. Sadly, Jaheira died. Fortunately, her clothes fit Sir Fuzzlelump well. Jaheira lived on in spirit, if not in practice. At the top of the tower, Ketheric Thorm explained that he would happily spend 17 more years building another cult if needs be. Twilight Eclipse was about to be brainwashed with magic, but was saved by Artificium Ex Machina, followed immediately by Angelus Ex Machina. Some scholars argued that the angel was added to this fight by jealous historians to downplay Twilight Eclipse's true power. These historians claimed that through it all she offered him protection. Whether they're right or wrong, there were moments when it felt as if all hope was lost. In the party's darkest hour, Minthara, Thorm's once loyal servant, brought the party back from the brink. Before Twilight Eclipse could land the killing blow, Ketheric Thorm declared that he had a second phase, but nobody was allowed to look at it yet because it was a surprise. He summoned a tentacle and disappeared into a cloud of black dust. Ketheric Thorm is dead, announced Twilight Eclipse. We have won. Once Sir Fuzzlump had explained what teleportation was, Twilight Eclipse let out an exasperated sigh and jumped into a hole. From there, things just got worse. Not only were there nameless undead horrors like ghouls and zombies, there was also a puzzle that...
As the console bursts into life, a mind touches your own. Alien and full of desperate need, but fragmented.
Thanks for interrupting. There was also a brain-teasing puzzle that looked like a big waste of time. Twilight Eclipse found a sort of evil answering machine powered by brains and a severed head. You would never catch me with my head cut off and without any hair on it, said Twilight Eclipse, unprompted. After a brief team-building exercise, Twilight Eclipse found a room full of mind flayers and normal people floating in tanks. He chose to purge the tanks and was briefly overwhelmed by guilt before remembering that he didn't actually care. At last, the party descended into the heart of Ketheric Thorm's lair. The general was in the middle of an argument with a flamboyant goth and evil dead Barbie.
His crypt breath sings to my sinews. Again, 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 again.
Eventually, the three villains overcame their differences and formed a cute little tableau to appease an oversized brain. They called the brain the Absolute, and Twilight Eclipse felt the bile rise in his throat as he realized that he had almost sworn loyalty to a giant levitating nerd. Outside, the giant brain commanded an army to start marching, but Twilight Eclipse didn't see that because he wasn't there. He was inside, listening to Ketheric Thorm waffling about how Driders were a menace to society.
I will kill you now, and then I will raise you as my servant.
Minthara didn't like the sound of that very much. Like a clumsy little fumble-thumbs, Ketheric Thorm accidentally fell backwards into an ominous pit. He re-emerged as a skeletal avatar of the God of Death, and Twilight Eclipse wondered whether that scythe had been there the whole time. Sir Fuzzlump chose this moment to kill a Mind Flayer with an opportunity attack, but sadly nobody was looking. The God of Death was undeniably spooky, but his strategy of standing in one place and not dodging allowed Twilight Eclipse to land a fatal blow.
Impossible. Death cannot take me. I am its master.
The rats! Together, we have crushed him, brain and body.
As Twilight Eclipse began to wordlessly strip Ketheric's corpse, the Dream Guardian appeared.
You did well. Really well.
This was glaringly obvious and didn't need to be said out loud. The Dream Guardian explained that by combining 3 magical gems, it was possible to dominate the Elder Brain. If you combine 3 magical gems, you can do whatever you want, replied Twilight Eclipse. That's how they work. He finished looting Ketheric's corpse and upcycled his armor by dyeing it pink. Minthara spent some time reflecting on her previous mistakes, and Twilight Eclipse suggested that the two of them should seek to take control of the Elder Brain.
It is as if you read my mind. Perhaps you did. There is yet one thing about you that troubles me, though. Something I need you to explain. When we killed the tieflings at the Grove, I was not in control of my actions. You do not have that excuse. So I ask you, why? Why kill them?
Twilight Eclipse explained that he didn't always know why he did the things he did. He just did them. If you never make a decision, you never make a mistake. Minthara did not seem particularly satisfied with this answer. The final step to taking down a cult is moving on. It was finally time to leave the Shadow Curse lands. It was an unusual place that was hard to warm to, a bit like Milton Keynes. As he tried to leave, Twilight Eclipse was ambushed by a group of Githyanki assassins. He had grown used to this sort of thing, and it was becoming increasingly clear that Vlaakith was jealous of his power and splendor. Somewhere else in Faerun, the villains were having a disagreement, but Twilight Eclipse didn't know about that because he wasn't there. He was busy climbing a ladder so he could finally catch a glimpse of the city of Baldur's Gate 3. As he lay staring up at the stars, Twilight Eclipse wished he understood how he'd ended up here. One day he'd been minding his business and shaking his authentic locks in the breeze. Now he had stumbled into being Faerun's last hope.
Gather! The reckoning is upon us!
Suddenly and inconveniently, a portal began to discharge Githyanki monks right into the middle of camp. Sir Fuzzalump teleported towards the portal and was quickly pummeled to death. The others fought their way through the invaders and made it safely to the astral plane. Thankfully, Fuzzalump's corpse was brought along with them, and he was quickly revived and put back to work. The Githyanki monks were attempting to break into a giant skull for some reason. Twilight Eclipse trusted his instincts and led his squad onwards towards the epicenter of the conflict. Once they stepped into the skull, it became immediately clear that the Githyanki were the good guys because they were flipping sick, and the Mind Flayer that lay pleading on the floor was the cause of all their problems.
Don't let my form deceive you. I am the one that's been protecting you.
Twilight Eclipse would not be falling for any Squid Games today. The other Githyanki didn't get the message that Twilight Eclipse was on their side, so he had to deal with them first. While the party were busy with their Xenocide, the Mind Flayer seized the opportunity to do whatever this is. The Mind Flayer asked for an opportunity to explain itself and began telling the most unbelievable story that Twilight Eclipse had ever heard. A significant portion of the tale centered around the creature disguising its true appearance with a flimsy little hood. "I am willing to accept that many things are true," said Twilight Eclipse, "but I will not believe that such a pathetic facade would not be sniffed out immediately. Were the people you worked with blind? Did you associate exclusively with the criminally stupid? Or were your esteemed colleagues too polite to point out how ridiculous you looked? How long did you expect to live this preposterous lie?" For some reason, he felt as though he might be about to cry. The Mind Flayer revealed that his captive was a Githyanki prince, potentially even the rightful ruler of the Githyanki. Twilight Eclipse was not particularly bothered by this and quite fancied himself as a future monarch instead.
If you let me, I can evolve you.
The Mind Flayer handed Twilight Eclipse a new brainworm, which he immediately slurped up like parasitic spaghetti.
A coldness seeps through your veins as the tadpole awakens, its yearning almost unbearable. Your mind is a veritable feast.
This is how it felt when I tried my first Tango Ice Blast in 2021. Twilight Eclipse still didn't trust the Mind Flayer, so he decided it was safer to kill it.
Your chest constricts. Your thoughts begin to splinter.
You are found. Now you hear me. Now you yield!
Obviously that didn't happen. It was a dream. He dreamt it. He continued to poke brainworms behind his eyes, becoming stronger and stronger with each new slippery head tenant. Lae'zel spent some time educating Twilight Eclipse about Githyanki history, but he couldn't really focus on what she was saying. For some reason, his attention span wasn't quite the same as it used to be. It was a new day and a new sunlit region. Sir Fuzzalump showed the party a new spell he'd been working on. Down the road, the party was annoyingly accosted by an unsupervised child.
Excuse me, I can't find my mum.
Twilight Eclipse told the little girl to f*** off, and Lae'zel agreed.
I don't know where to go.
Perhaps a flash of my weapon will get the message across.
Nice, Lae'zel. Very nice. In a nearby house, a man was making a scene about some squatters. Twilight Eclipse felt that these stakes sounded very Act 1 and let nature take its course.
The flaming fists are supposed to protect this good city, but they allow trash and vermin to take our homes and goods.
It seemed that an audience member from Question Time had escaped and was now raving in the street. Twilight Eclipse imagined that the man's bloviating was intended to distract from the obvious wig that was clinging desperately to his scalp. Down the road, some hunters were complaining because their children had been captured by an evil vampire.
My friend from the Hag Swamp. You're a bright light on a dark day.
Twilight Eclipse had never seen this man before in his life, but he agreed to help rescue the children anyway. He'd never met a vampire before, and it sounded exciting. He told the monster hunters that saving their children would be his top priority, but then he found out there was a circus in town.
Hello, hello, and welcome to the Circus of the Last Days, the finest extra-planar circus there is. Ah!
Twilight Eclipse bore this gatekeeper no ill will, but explained to him that he would tear him apart like focaccia if he didn't step aside immediately. Inside the circus, Twilight Eclipse took part in a game show where he had to answer questions about Lae'zel.
2 hearts beating a perfect rhythm. But I know the truth. Only one face haunts your dreams each night. Close your eyes, sweetness, and she will come to you.
Twilight Eclipse closed his eyes, but when he opened them, the presenter had wandered off and had been replaced by a whining corpse dressed in a lobster costume. Feeling underwhelmed, Twilight Eclipse went to heckle a clown.
You, my special assistant. Come on up. You, my friend, are the most special person in the circus, in all of Baldur's Gate. Does anyone know why?
He didn't appreciate being spoken down to by something as pathetic and desperate as a clown, and was relieved when the whole spectacle turned out to be an ambush. In the ensuing scuffle, Fine Familiar was eaten by a dinosaur, but apart from that, everything was okay. In a nearby basement, the party discovered a sleepy mind flayer, which barely had time to lament its own mortality before becoming proof of it. Twilight Eclipse absorbed its squid-like energy and learned how to transform into a displacer beast. This is a very normal thing to want to do. Everyone was quite accepting of this except for Lae'zel.
I can see the change in you. Feel the parasite worming its way through you even further. You have invited your own misery. I will not break our alliance for it, but I will not condone it.
It felt like the end of a chapter in his life. A road splitting in two. Anyway, that's my story, Twilight Eclipse told the reporter. One road splitting in two. Quite poetic if I do say so myself. But I have a feeling I've got one more tale in me. As soon as you're done shapeshifting, I'll tell you the rest. Back in the circus, Twilight Eclipse met a little goblin who offered to sculpt him for 5,000 gold. He generally avoided giving artists money because art is subjective and therefore worthless. However, he did like the idea of owning a facsimile of his majestic and feasible hair. He gave the goblin all the money he had.
Halt! By orders of Lord Gortash, refugees are no longer allowed in the city. Turn around.
Those orders sound pointless and boring, said Twilight Eclipse. Just like you.
Help! I'm being attacked!
The party advanced into Worm's Crossing. In a room above an advertiser-friendly business, Kithrak Voss was begging for help from the British. When Voss's negotiations fell apart, Raphael offered Twilight Eclipse an item known as the Orphic Hammer. Lae'zel seemed very interested in the arrangement. Twilight Eclipse wanted nothing to do with this British creep and declined the offer.
The means to loosing the Prince of the Comet was within our grasp, and you refused it. Why?
He explained to Lae'zel that if she wanted his support, she shouldn't have criticized him for having worms in his head. "Sticks and stones may break my bones," he said, "but your words have irrevocably changed the way I view our relationship." Then his nose started to bleed. Twilight Eclipse tried to lie to Voss about his conversation with Raphael, but he got distracted because everything kept buffering.
The House of Hope. We must find a way in.
Every house has an entrance, Vinisk. Even those in the Hells. You must find it.
It was a difficult decision. He could either go to hell or do something else instead. Downstairs, the Worms Crossing Fringe Festival was in full swing.
Looking for another chapter of dirty law for your biography?
You have but to ask, and we can grant you a moment of pleasure.
Twilight Eclipse told the drow that their show sounded weird and explained that he only watched pantomimes, preferably Aladdin. Outside, he dared Sir Fuzzalump to land on a passing boat. Sadly, the boat didn't have a hitbox. "Game of the year indeed," mumbled Twilight Eclipse, wisely. After reviving Sir Fuzzalump, the party approached the entrance to Gortash's castle.
Sorry, chum, can't let you through. Worms Rock's closed for the day.
Twilight Eclipse attempted to bluff his way in with a story about an assassin, but the guards responded that the walls of Worms Rock were impregnable and that there was no way anyone was getting in today. Twilight Eclipse abandoned the party and set off alone, hunting for gossip. After accidentally drawing the ire of Gortash's mods, Twilight Eclipse transformed into a displacer beast for a bit and spent some time making a nuisance of himself. Eventually, he got bored and flew back over the chasm to rejoin his squad. Twilight Eclipse had never levitated before, but he'd always known it was possible. Most people just never give it a proper go. It's easier to follow the path of least resistance and get a job in marketing instead. By now, the statue had been delivered to camp, and morale had never been higher.
Shah has discarded young Shadowheart like a broken toy. The gods are ever fickle.
Twilight Eclipse had no idea who Minthara was talking about. He therefore didn't notice that Shadowheart and Minthara had never met each other. The next day, Twilight Eclipse tried to bribe his way into Worm's Rock. It may have seemed like all hope was lost, but he had one more trick up his sleeve. Sometimes the most obvious solution is also the funniest. Sir Fuzzalump summoned a cloud of daggers. Gortash's TikTok flock tried to escape, but Lae'zel made them blow up as they ran away, almost exploding to death herself in the process. This was a bit embarrassing for Lae'zel, but she was soon outdone when Sir Fuzzalump lost control of his vape cloud and needed to be rescued. Annoyingly, the gate didn't automatically lower now that all the guards were dead. It was best not to dwell on whether this bloodshed served a purpose. Sir Fuzzalump cast Featherfall, and the party gracefully floated down to a nearby ledge. While exploring, they found a secret door, but it didn't seem to open from this side. "I can't handle this," said Twilight Eclipse, and he was right. Elsewhere, a narrow sewage pipe seemed to promise entry into the castle. Twilight Eclipse was about to hand Sir Fuzzalump a pot of grease when the gnome suggested that they send Find Familiar instead. The feline infiltrator discovered a secret wall on the other end of the pipe that led into the castle's prison. Nearby, he found a plate of surströmming, which, although pungent, was actually quite... The party eventually found their way inside using some vines. Gortash was cowering in his throne room, surrounded by the cast of Bridgerton.
I'd like to propose a pact, a divine oath sworn upon spirit and flesh. I do no harm to you, nor you to me. Thorm's stone is yours to keep. When you slay Orin and take her stone, you bring it here. So the three are united once again.
This proposal seemed a little bit dodgy, but Twilight Eclipse rolled a nat 20 on his insight check and decided it was fine. He swore on Almighty Groomsh's name that he would defeat Orin and ally with Gortash. There were a few puzzled faces in the room, but Twilight Eclipse had always worshipped Groomsh and mentioned him often. Duke Ravengard was there too, and was in a surprisingly good mood given the recent death of his only son.
Have you come to behold the new dawn?
You should call it the Breaking Dawn, said Twilight Eclipse. Trust me, people will get it. Somehow, Gortash wasn't finished speaking yet.
Your camp is compromised. One among you is an imposter.
Twilight Eclipse advised his team against scrutinizing each other's appearances because it's rude. He would investigate this matter discreetly, alone.
Our camp houses an imposter then. Say nothing. Trust no one. Not even me.
This was an odd thing to say, so Lae'zel quickly became the prime suspect. Minthara, on the other hand, locked Twilight Eclipse in a hard stare. As their two colonies of brainworms sang longingly to each other, Minthara and Twilight Eclipse felt their thoughts coalesce into a single inconvenient truth. They both fancied each other a lot.
I have never lacked confidence, but this conflict seems so much bigger than the two of us. It frightens me. I do not know if we will survive it, but whatever life remains to us, I would gladly spend it fighting at your side and lying with you at night.
He had many things to think about all at the same time. For some reason, the lost girl from before was still lurking around the camp, pretending to be useful. She was gesticulating with a kebab that looked distinctly mediocre.
It's not mediocre! You haven't even tried it! It took me hours to chop the little vegetables and get the meat roasted right, and... No, you won't even try it!
Twilight Eclipse was not at all moved by this pathetic display. He called the child a little minga and threw her kebab into a bush. It turned out that the little girl had actually been an imposter called Orin the whole time, and also Gortash somehow, and then Orin again, which was confusing. Whoever they actually were, they told Twilight Eclipse to kill Gortash and then teleported away. The imposter is dead, said Twilight Eclipse. We have won. The lower city was a hive of activity where everyone had one thing on their mind.
Print issues limiting space, according to our esteemed editor.
Used to think those things were going to make me feel safer.
Are they gonna pay us for the animals they take?
The one thing did of course vary from person to person. The party found a temple which conveniently allowed Twilight Eclipse to commune with Groomsh, the mighty one-eyed god about whom he often spoke. Seeking divine favour, he offered a whole rotisserie chicken to the altar.
Your offering is accepted, but more evidence of devotion is required.
Twilight Eclipse reached for his coin purse before remembering he'd spent all of his money on a statue. Instead, he started offering a series of random items, including a soul coin, a longsword, Karlach's boots, and a bone.
Your offering is accepted, but more evidence of devotion is required.
He explained to the party that Grumsh was a complicated god whose desires were shrouded in mystery. This isn't true, but it's what he believed. A halfling couple were hosting a wine festival nearby. The party were about to purchase a group ticket when the husband fumbled the sale.
The festival was put together to raise funds for the children, you see. Times are a touch tough at the moment.
Twilight Eclipse wished people would stop asking him to look after surplus children. Nobody looked after him when he'd hatched out of an egg in space and he'd turned into a well-rounded and interesting person with nothing to hide. Nearby, some of the aforementioned surplus children were daring each other to enter a creepy building. The party made the reasonable assumption that this was where Cazador the vampire lived. They even lined up nicely outside to set the scene. Sadly, it was just a weird shop that sold devilish oddities. If you ever go to Whitby, they've got lots of places like this. Sir Fuzzlump bought a new hat, which arguably made the whole trip worthwhile.
Can you believe it? They removed the Baldur's Mouth puzzle section. That was the best bit. If they don't put the puzzles back in the broadsheet, I'm writing a strongly worded letter to that editor. Believe you me.
Twilight Eclipse had never watched Only Connect, so he hadn't encountered this brand of oddball before. He was moved by the Dragonborn's passion and refused to buy the local paper as an act of solidarity with the local dorks. Speaking of, a local wizard presented the party with a tempting offer.
It's quite simple. Bring the night song here and collect your reward.
Twilight Eclipse had a vague memory of the night song stamping on a dead man's head 5 or 6 times. Passing her on to be someone else's problem sounded very convenient. He was finding it hard to read facial expressions these days, so he missed this comically evil look on Lorroakan's face. Conveniently, Aelin was very keen to go and meet Lorroakan, presumably to stamp on his face 5 or 6 times.
Our closest ally will accompany me, won't you? It will be a swift and fruitful chore.
They found Lorroakan lounging on a throne of books in a way that was so embarrassing that Twilight Eclipse considered double-crossing him. Ultimately, he stuck to the plan and prepared to move a host of angels from the spirituality section of your local library into the history section. Sir Fuzzlump turned Aelin into a sheep, making her useless for several turns. Useless. The angels smote Lae'zel and also a little guy called Mickey. Twilight Eclipse was irritated by this and killed an angel with his spirit guardians. Then he made another one of their brains melt with tadpole powers. Roland's magic missile took down a third. And Minthara finished Aelin off with a thunderous smite. She would henceforth be known as Minthara Angelsbane. For some reason, Roland tried to then solo his former allies and was quickly dispatched by Twilight Eclipse. The party extracted Lae'zel's soul from hell before receiving 5,000 gold for their troubles. Lorroakan promised to be an ally in the endgame, which was a nice gesture. Twilight Eclipse had traded one immortal ally for another, and in the process refilled the statue-shaped hole in his bank account.
You stood to gain from my undoing. I know your reasons, fetid though they are. But Isabel, please, do not harm a hair on her blessed head. May the Moon Maiden have mercy on your soul.
He went to explain to Isabel that her girlfriend was being imprisoned by an evil wizard forever, but that dialogue option didn't appear. Game of the year, he mumbled, which out of context was a strange thing to say. Seeking a change of scenery, the heroes continued to explore the city. They met an odd man in the park who was wearing a mask and hood, presumably because he was catastrophically ugly. Minthara Angelsbane helped him out by caving in his skull with her mace. Sir Fuzzlump summoned a cloud of daggers, and Minthara Angelsbane used telekinesis to throw one of their assailants into it. Then, Twilight Eclipse shoved someone through it, following this move up with a black hole which sucked a third enemy into the cloud of daggers. It was such an exhilarating combo that a nearby town guard was overwhelmed with wonder and died. The heroes reached level 10, and Twilight Eclipse became convinced that Grumsh owed him a favour, perhaps because of the rotisserie chicken he'd offered him before. Inexplicably, Twilight Eclipse had a hunch that Cazador might be hiding in the sewers, so he led the party down a manhole. After descending, the party were immediately confronted by the stench of a sewer wizard and his greasy associates. It was like walking into Friday Night Magic on a summer evening. The ensuing battle took ages and wasn't very interesting, so we'll skip to the best bit when Minthara got a new cape. In the next room, Cazador the vampire had apparently set up a trial of some sort where the party were ambushed by a red ghost, along with enemies with intimidating names like Flo-Flo. Twilight Eclipse didn't believe in ghosts. He knew they were real, but understood that they rarely achieved their goals. This encounter was no exception. As the party stopped for the night, Twilight Eclipse made sure that Lae'zel saw him giving Minthara Angelsbane a little kiss. Twice. The next morning, Lae'zel seemed unfazed and suggested a new plan of action.
We must find our way to the House of Hope and take the Orphic Hammer.
Twilight Eclipse had no idea what Lae'zel was talking about and reminded her that they were actually hunting a vampire. The stakes were too high to lose focus now. Sir Fuzzalump eviscerated an aggressive rat colony with a cloud of daggers.
You are not ready. You need all the stones before we can proceed. Listen to me. This is for your own good. Without all 3 stones, our efforts here are pointless. Dangerous even.
Twilight Eclipse was tired of taking orders from mind flayers and insisted that he knew what he was doing.
You are found.
I forgot to proofread that bit. What actually happened is that Twilight Eclipse was grossed out by a colony of rats, so he headed in the other direction. In a pile of corpses, they found a clown's head, which it felt prudent to dispose of.
Stone seals this chamber against the world. No key, no handle. Better to forget. Better to live.
It was obvious that Cazador was hiding on the other side of this door, but nobody could figure out how to get through it. The party tried going a different way, but all they found were the wrong kind of undead. After wrapping things up with the mummies, they continued checking the sewers for any vampiric influence. A puzzle involving valves looked promising. Hearts have valves which pump blood, and vampires drink blood. Sadly, all they found nearby were more hooded assassins. This is bullshit, thought Twilight Eclipse. Accidentally, they stumbled across the former residence of the Mind Flayer who kept lecturing them. Twilight Eclipse spotted a powerful-looking sword and let his old one fall to the floor with a clang. To this day, if you listen carefully at street level, you can still hear a copyright-free rendition of Star-Spangled Banner playing from somewhere in the sewers. Minthara upcycled some Mind Flayer attire to make it more heroic and drippy. In the next room, hostile Githyanki were popping out of portals.
What reward do you think the astral prism will fetch once I pluck it from your corpse and present it to Vlaakith?
Twilight Eclipse responded that the only thing he intended to give Vlaakith was a punch in the head. This blasphemy was spoken with such certainty that the Githyanki assassins fled in terror. Since vampires like to wear gaudy outfits, the party went to interrogate a local tailor. He didn't know what they were talking about, but was happy to provide them with a quick makeover, as well as a much-needed refill of the Hue of Heroes. The Mind Flayer known as the Emperor appeared in Twilight Eclipse's dream that night and started monologuing about his life. Twilight Eclipse would have nodded off if he wasn't already asleep. The Emperor revealed one of its memories to show how it had brainwashed people to accept its ridiculous disguise. "This has no relevance to my life," replied Twilight Eclipse. "I'm bored. You're being boring." The next morning, the party climbed a ladder, hoping to get a lay of the land and finally find Cazador's lair.
This is the palace of Cazador Zar.
"Bingo," said Twilight Eclipse, which actually made sense here, fair enough. Inside the palace, a pack of wolves were devouring someone's grandma. Twilight Eclipse asked if they were waiting for the new moon and was surprised when they didn't get it. "Werewolves? More like werewolves," said Twilight Eclipse, but nobody laughed. The party leveled up again, and Sir Fuzzalump suddenly understood how to disintegrate people with magic. It was a good thing that nobody had ever antagonized him. Within Cazador's lair, Twilight Eclipse found the Gur children who he'd agreed to save ages ago. They were vampires, which had not been mentioned when he'd accepted the quest.
It's Cazador. His servant kidnapped us. The pretty one with the frilly clothes and white hair. One moment we're at camp, then the world goes dark.
Twilight Eclipse had never met any of Cazador's servants before and told the girl to be quiet so he could have a think. He took a closer look at the children's character sheets and noticed they were immortal. "Time for Plan B," he said loudly, before heading to Cazador's boss arena.
Wait! No! It cannot be. Were you the one who took my poor Astarion under your wing, only to abandon him so cruelly?
Twilight Eclipse had no time for vampire trickery and explained he had no idea what an Astarion was.
Truly? I could have sworn I knew. Perhaps it is your plain, forgettable face. consummatum est. Ego cecidi.
The Vampire Lord is no more, but his legacy remains. 7,000 vampires spawn, including the stolen children of the Gur Hunters. What will you do with them all?
Twilight Eclipse levitated for a moment and then used Cazador's staff to bind all remaining vampire spawn to his will. Close enough. Cazador had dropped a key to a bank vault upon death, which seemed worth investigating.
How may the Fellowship of Financiers serve you?
A relaxed tone and easy smile, but the halfling's shifting gaze gives it away. Something has him rattled.
Twilight Eclipse announced that he was obviously a cleric of Groomsh and that he could fix whatever problem the bank was hiding downstairs in the name of the almighty one-eyed god of the orcs. Alarmingly, this worked. This is why I don't use banks. I keep all of my money safe in an Extreme Dinosaur's lunchbox buried by the M6 toll road. Downstairs, the party discovered a selection of vaults protected by some sort of teleportation trap. Flying over it didn't work. Neither did flying over it again. Sir Fuzzalump suggested using Dimension Door to teleport over, and it was only then that the party learnt the difference between Vault number 3 and High Security Vault number 3. To get to the high security vaults, Lae'zel grappled with a challenging puzzle that took almost a minute to solve via brute force. In the next room, a mountain of a man forced his way out of the mouth of a mimic. Twilight Eclipse was reminded of the day he hatched from his egg, although his scalp had been far better protected from the elements. In a shocking twist, Jaheira materialized out of thin air, having apparently survived her first experience of being killed. She and the bald stranger vanished without a trace, but Twilight Eclipse had no time to mourn as more cultists attacked. After a long and annoying fight where people kept going invisible, the followers of Baal were vanquished, again. While they worshipped the idea of murder, they didn't seem to mind whether it occurred in the active or passive voice. With the bank now free of killers, it seemed reasonable to loot Cazador's vault and pick up a few extras that were lying around. Sir Fuzzalump retaught the concept of teleportation to Twilight Eclipse, who was relieved to learn that Jaheira was still alive. She was hiding in the sewers, which was strange. She was also hostile, which seemed out of character. When she died, it turned out she'd been a shapeshifter the whole time. The bald man had also fallen in the fight, and his death had attracted the attention of some sort of rat. Twilight Eclipse wondered why Matt Mercer had agreed to voice such a minor character who only appeared in 2 scenes. Back on street level, Twilight Eclipse discovered the House of Grief. This is where Lae'zel told me to look for the Orphic Hammer, he thought, wrongly. Inside, he paid 1,000 gold for a vibe check, hoping that this was code for being given the hammer that he was looking for. It turned out to be more of a questionnaire.
The lips may try to deceive, but the heart will offer the truth in the end. What last caused you to shed a tear?
This was easy to answer because Twilight Eclipse had never cried. He'd pioneered a technique where he buried his feelings and lashed out at those closest to him whenever he felt overwhelmed.
What is your unspoken desire?
An unfamiliar presence caresses the deepest layers of your mind. You realize she's trying to detect your thoughts.
Twilight Eclipse spent a long time hovering over option 6 before confronting the mind-reading witch.
For the record, you have a false...
He exhaled sharply and loudly and started humming a copyright-free rendition of Star Spangled Banner. The mind-reading woman opened a secret passage and vanished. It was time to go underground again, apparently.
Still me, even after everything.
Curious that Larian Studios have time to insert Undertale references in their work, but still haven't responded to my letters about making Twilight Eclipse the default Githyanki Dream Guardian. The House of Grief's basement looked a lot like the Gauntlet of Shar. It was odd that such a minor god kept popping up despite having no relevance to anyone in the party.
You and I need to speak.
To nobody's surprise, the Shar worshippers wanted the Astral Prism. Twilight Eclipse explained that if they wanted it so much, they should have sent one of their own clerics to retrieve it instead of relying on him. During the battle, Viconia Devere called on Shar's divine intervention. It was so ineffective that it turned half her congregation into atheists. 6 days later, the battle was over, and Shar's former worshippers found the darkness they so desperately sought. There was some good loot lying around, and also a hidden cave full of night orchids which failed to resonate with the party in any way. Our heroes had reached level 12 and unlocked the unstoppable power of... feats. The same ones available at level 4. Look, I don't mean to sound ungrateful, but is that really it? said Twilight Eclipse. After yet another fruitless expedition underground, the party returned to the surface seeking a purpose.
Welcome to Lady Janeth's celebration of the arts.
Twilight Eclipse recognized that name and realized he had some information that he needed to pass on.
Always good to see fresh interest in the arts.
He spent several minutes explaining that he wasn't interested in art except for pantomimes, preferably Aladdin. He then informed the lady that her fiancé had died screaming in agony after wandering into an explosion. If it's any consolation, he told her, he didn't mention you once. Then he patiently waited for his reward. By the docks, a crowd had gathered to immolate a minor celebrity. Society has gone to the dogs, thought Twilight Eclipse as he stood by and watched.
Sorry, are you here for a wave servant Holly's funeral? Oh, it's already started. They're just inside.
He wasn't really dressed for a funeral, but in fairness, neither was anyone else.
What tribute do you bring to honor the Wave Mother's fallen daughter?
Twilight Eclipse didn't have anything tangible to offer, so he offered up some violent thoughts and vengeful prayers in Groomsh's name. The mermaid explained that her friend had been killed by some sort of metal monster. Twilight Eclipse was delighted by this news and ran to tell the others that they finally had something important to do. Sir Fuzzlump asked if it had anything to do with defeating Orin, and Twilight Eclipse replied that it definitely did.
Oi! What's this? You ain't supposed to be down here, mate.
You spot a curious metal contraption in the water. A submersible.
Twilight Eclipse found the concept of an underwater boat as questionable as its engineer's northern accent.
This is about them Umbly servants. You tell them to stay out of the way. Cap needs the right of way. He can't stop on a dime when they go darting in front of the prow.
The dwarf explained that Gortash had an underwater prison where he kept political prisoners. Sort of like Rapture from Bioshock, said Twilight Eclipse. Not really, replied the dwarf. That's more of an allegory for the pitfalls of an unchecked libertarian society. Let's agree to disagree, said Twilight Eclipse, who didn't know what the word pitfall meant. As the submarine swam towards the prison, Gortash FaceTimed the party and threatened to blow everything up if they kept going. Twilight Eclipse knew that explosions don't work underwater, so he called Gortash's bluff. Inexplicably, the prison began to collapse. Twilight Eclipse started shooting levers at random to stabilize the base and accidentally freed Duke Ravengard from his cell. The prison's Sahuagin guards tried to stop the Duke from escaping, but were decisively schooled, as Twilight Eclipse chipped away at their health bars and battered their mushy pea-brains with his mace. Some prisoners had to be left behind, but they died at peace with no idea what was about to happen. Everyone important made it out safely. A rock gnome told Twilight Eclipse that many of her people were being forced to build robots for Gortash, and he made a carefully worded promise that he would help them to rebel.
You were to administer Umberly's justice. Instead, you conspire with the abomination.
Twilight Eclipse immediately snitched on the dwarf submersible pilot and received a cute little outfit for Sir Fuzzlump as a reward. Duke Ravengard thanked Twilight Eclipse for rescuing him and didn't mention his son once. He asked if anyone wanted to rescue Councillor Floric from Gortash's dungeon and was met with an unenthusiastic silence. Next, it was time to visit the factory to put an end to Gortash's army of Robocops. The Gondians inside were rebelling, and Twilight Eclipse made good on his promise to help them. Unfortunately, Sir Fuzzlump bottled it when it came to deactivating the motivators, so all of the workers' heads exploded at once, like that bit in the first Kingsman film. One of the Gondians survived this, but he was reduced to viscera when a robot blew up in his face. Up ahead, the party found a room full of brains in jars, who had come to the consensus that subscribing to a YouTube channel was beneath them, even though they'd watched almost 2 hours of scripted content for free. Gortash's magnum opus was waiting for the party in the next room and started spitting hellfire. It was like if Lin-Manuel Miranda was cast as Judge Frollo. Embarrassingly, the robot was barely able to defend itself and spent most of the fight cowering both from and within a cloud of daggers. Twilight Eclipse tried to figure out how to turn off the robot army. Sir Fuzzlump was able to figure out how the machine worked but didn't know the password. Twilight Eclipse said he'd have a guess and successfully initiated the factory's self-destruct sequence. It is possible that the volatility of Gortash's creations reveals a deeper message about the self-destructive nature of ambition. Twilight Eclipse didn't consider this, though. He was too busy thinking about who would be in charge once he killed Gortash. Twilight Eclipse visited Raphael and told him he'd changed his mind about the deal he'd been offered before. He'd recently realized that he could say one thing and then do the opposite. He wondered what his life would have been like if he'd known this sooner.
A pleasure
doing business with you.
It was so simple. All he had to do was remember to double-cross Raphael once he was finished with Orin and Gortash. The party fought their way through Gortash's throne room, seeking access to the top of Worm's Rock. Sir Fuzzalump summoned a cloud of daggers and then used magic to disintegrate the castle's warden, who hopefully deserved it.
I once saw value in our alliance, but you have proven most disloyal. Your actions sparked the fall of my steel watch. Whatever bargain we might have made fell with it.
Twilight Eclipse tried to gaslight Gortash by saying they'd never agreed to an alliance, but he wasn't buying it.
The people will celebrate your fall and my part in it. Now, roll over and die.
Things did not start well for the party. Twilight Eclipse did his best to keep people on their feet, but the odds had turned against him. "Almighty Groomsh," he cried, "my dread lord about whom I often speak, grant us a quick reset to full health." Some say it was the conviction in Twilight Eclipse's voice that drove his party onwards with new vigour. Others say it was the intervention of Groomsh himself. One group is wrong, as is often the case. Before long, Gortash was standing in a cloud of daggers and covered in poison. He entered phase 2 of his boss fight by becoming bigger and scarier. He knocked Lae'zel to the floor in a single punch. He tried to flee away from the cloud of daggers, but Minthara Angelsbane used telekinesis to throw him right back where he belonged. Finally, in an act of unparalleled heroism, Twilight Eclipse's shirtless angel friend flew willingly into the cloud of daggers to deliver the finishing blow. Then a bomb exploded and Twilight Eclipse fainted. In the castle's dungeon, they found Councillor Floric, moping.
It's over. I will soon be hanged on the city gallows to a chorus of cheers.
Twilight Eclipse didn't like Floric's defeatist tone and left her in the prison to develop a more positive outlook. They now had 2 of the 3 magic gems, but Twilight Eclipse knew that they would need to change tactics to catch Orin the Shapeshifter. Everyone knew who he was and thought he was a hero. This indelible truth would make it difficult to get close to the city's criminal underworld. After finding a disguise kit in a hidden room, he knew what he needed to do.
Halt, Civvy. Turn back. This is an active crime scene.
Hold on, Thorneal. I'm tired of standing here. Devella's been up there for ages. Some diversion would be welcome.
The guards had no idea who he was. The disguise was working perfectly.
Name, rank, and reason for interrupting an active crime scene. For your sake, the last one better be bloody good.
He explained that his name was Ian, and that he'd been ordered by the police force he was in charge of to find the Baal cultists and kill them. Devella was thankful that the police had finally sent someone important, and explained that she'd identified a list of people who were at risk of being murdered. Ian argued that the same is true of everyone, but a lead is a lead, so he agreed to investigate. One of the targets was involved in running the wine festival. Ian deduced that Cora had poisoned some of the wine. He needed to test his theory, so he asked for a glass. Surprisingly, Cora drank some too, and it turned out that a small army of clones were the actual culprits. Once the assassins were dead, Ian broke free from his paralysis and lamented that he hadn't arrived in time to stop the killers due to delays caused by pencil-pushing bureaucrats back at the station. As each new murder victim was discovered, Ian would mutter something similar about paperwork before quickly moving on to the next location. One of the targets on the list was still alive, so Ian warned her to watch out for murderers.
Huh. Come on then, mate. Who would want me dead?
She raised a fair point, so he left her to it. As Ian arrived to interrogate the tailor, he discovered that he was in the middle of being murdered. "Oi, get away from that man who I've never seen before in my life," he yelled convincingly. Once the assassins had been taken care of, Devella revealed what she'd learnt.
These killings aren't random. In fact, they seem to be part of some sort of test. The killers paralyze their victims, take their hands as an offering for Baal. It grants them access to a tribunal. From what I could gather, it's some sort of rite of initiation for aspiring cultists to prove their worth.
Ian always carried a spare hand with him in case he needed to count to 15, so he told Devella to leave the rest to him. The secret entrance to the Death Shrine was hidden inside a funeral parlour, which was charmingly on brand. A secret door asked for the colour of night, and Ian responded by splintering it with a single kick. Within the hideout stood 3 knights, one who always told the truth, one who always lied, and one who only spoke in platitudes.
Everything happens for a reason.
For the second time in his life, the Githyanki hero found himself in front of a tribunal. He reminded the assembled parties that Sir Fuzzalump was technically an independent contractor and not a worker. When Saravok announced that it was time for Ian to be judged by Baal, Ian revealed that he was actually Twilight Eclipse and had been wearing a disguise the whole time.
"You mean your whole life?"
replied Saravok. "No," said Twilight Eclipse. What a weird question. Sir Fuzzalump transformed Saravok into a sheep, which was very useful. Then the party beat him to death inside a cloud of daggers. Minthara suggested a group photo, and everyone agreed that was a great idea. Twilight Eclipse thought he'd seen everything, but the flying elephant that was chained up nearby made him doubt himself. There is no end to the ugliness in this world, he thought, loudly. After a quick pit stop at camp to remove his disguise, Twilight Eclipse returned to the sewers after learning that the door they found earlier actually led to Orin instead of Cazador. Inside the Temple of Baal, Orin had captured the annoying little girl from before. This was confusing because Twilight Eclipse thought Orin was the little girl from before. When Orin proceeded to stab the girl to death, it seemed plausible that he was mistaken. Then Orin exploded and was replaced by a lizard that was much more threatening. It was another embarrassingly easy encounter in which Minthara insisted she be given the killing blow for plot reasons. In the lizard's dying moment, it flailed melodramatically before turning into a skeleton and melting.
The child did not survive to witness your triumph. All life within her was extinguished by Orin's blades. But you still live.
The fact that Twilight Eclipse was still alive was obvious and didn't need to be said. This is why one narrator is enough. The Emperor mistook Minthara Lizardbane for Twilight Eclipse and told her to take the 3 magic gems and confront the Elder Brain. That night at camp, she told Twilight Eclipse there was something she needed to say.
When you first knew me, I was no different to Orin. A mad woman, butchering prey in the name of a god who would discard me without a thought once I was no longer of use. If you had killed me when we first met, I would have been just one more casualty of your crusade against the Absolute. And nobody would remember me.
Twilight Eclipse assured Minthara that he would never forget the allies that had supported him on his journey. Then he told a Githyanki monk to stop loitering near his camp. As the party rowed towards the Brain's lair, a stalactite smashed their boat to pieces and they all drowned. Wait, no they didn't. Twilight Eclipse was fine and not a hair on his head was out of place. Not that there was any chance they would be, but it was a relief nonetheless. Once the party was somehow safely ashore, the Elder Brain emerged from a nearby lake. H.P. Lovecraft would have had a hard time describing this, but I'm better than him. It was like seeing a massive brain float out of a lake with some lights on it.
Who do you think told the Chosen about the astral prism? Who do you think planted the knowledge of Orpheus's power and the fear of what it could do?
At last, everything became clear. The importance of the astral prism and why so many people had died trying to claim it. It was the only way to shut out the Brain's irrelevant questions. Twilight Eclipse focused on the power of the magic gems and used all of his might to dominate the Brain to do his bidding. Or at least he would have done if the Emperor hadn't interfered and pulled him through a portal. "You loathsome, squid-faced creep," said Twilight Eclipse. "I was about to win, you idiot! I had it right where I wanted it, but you have once again built a wall between me and my dreams. You are the embodiment of mediocrity. I am embarrassed to have met you. You have only ever excelled at being a disappointment, and every breath you take exhausts me."
After all we've been through, I have been your salvation from the very beginning. I told you we had one solution. You rejected it. I told you I sought only one thing: freedom. You have denied me this. You have exhausted our alliance, and in so doing, you have ruined us all. I did everything I could to avoid this, but it seems you have whittled my options down to a single one. In order to survive, I must now join the Netherbrain.
The Emperor's decision to ally with its alleged nemesis did little to counter Twilight Eclipse's observations about his character. The party destroyed some crystals with the Orphic Hammer and were about to do the same thing to Prince Orpheus's shiny head when the Githyanki noble offered to become a mind flayer in order to fight against the Brain. Twilight Eclipse didn't understand the relevance of this plan, but was grateful that nobody expected him to do the same, as it would have undermined years of careful conditioning and air drying. Orpheus told the party to kill him once they'd taken down the Nether Brain, and Twilight Eclipse told him not to worry. That was already the plan. Kithrak Voss was not too happy to learn that his prince was now an Illithid, but Twilight Eclipse and Lae'zel reminded him that having a monarchy in the first place was deeply embarrassing. They suggested that this matter could be resolved later.
As you wish. I stand at the ready.
Meanwhile, the Brain had begun to turn ordinary people into vitriolic monsters in a similar way to how the 24-hour news cycle has impacted your parents. Nearby, somebody called Bjorn had assembled all of Twilight Eclipse's friends and allies in a room that was a bit big for the occasion.
My steel is yours, and I'm not alone.
Whatever strength I have to lend, I will lend it.
Ramazith's arcane artillery is more than ready to demolish your enemies and mine. Give the word, and you will not be disappointed.
I'm in the mood to crack some skulls after that in the Temple of Baal. The City Watch will be glad to oblige me.
Once it was clear that nobody else was coming, Twilight Eclipse delivered a speech off the cuff, and Sir Fuzzalump used magic to create the sound of a large crowd cheering him on. A nostalgic selection of miscellaneous enemies tried to stop the party from reaching the Brain, and realised too late that they were on the losing side of history. As Twilight Eclipse clutched onto the Brain's stem, it floated high above the city, like a Paw Patrol balloon loosed from the hands of a distracted child. As he reached the summit of the giant floating nerd, Twilight Eclipse was devastated to learn that the Emperor was still alive and had enlisted a Blue Eyes Red Dragon to fight alongside him.
That face. The one in my dreams.
I know you. I know everything about you. Your thoughts, your feelings, your weaknesses. And so do they.
The Emperor was dead before he could finish monologuing as his former captive devoured his brain. Twilight Eclipse demonstrated that Spirit Guardians were more powerful than Dream Guardians. You already know what Sir Fuzzalump did, but this time it was at level 6. The dragon engulfed Lae'zel in fire, and she took it quite well, all things considered. In a surprising display of sisterhood, Minthara protected Lae'zel by single-handedly killing the dragon with a series of divine smites. She would henceforth be known as Minthara Dragon's Bane. The heroes valiantly fought their way into the Brain's mind. Don't overthink it, that's what happened. Sir Fuzzalump summoned a cloud of daggers. Minthara Dragonsbane staggered the Nether Brain with a divine smite and then finished it off by stabbing it really hard. She would henceforth be known as Minthara Brainsbane.
At last, it is subdued.
Spare me. Join me. Wield me. Become absolute.
This is the moment, my love. The moment in which we make a new world for ourselves.
All the power he could ever dream of now lay within his grasp. With Minthara Brainsbane by his side, he could reform the world in his image. Never again would strangers whisper behind his back. Never again would he endure the looks of disbelief on their faces. But Twilight Eclipse was not a nerd, nor would he betray Groomsh by abandoning madness for reason. He ordered the Brain to destroy itself and to take its brainworms with it. His mind was a symphony of anguish as his personal colony of parasites went up in flames. The Nether Brain plummeted into the sea and Twilight Eclipse fell with it. And so did his hair, obviously. He was fine because he landed in water.
It is done. The Absolute eradicated. Vengeance exacted. We are free. No more gods or monsters. Except those of our own making.
Minthara Brainsbane spoke the truth. It was time for Twilight Eclipse to build the future he deserved.
You helped me destroy that abomination. Now help me destroy myself. You must kill me.
Twilight Eclipse had always wanted to kill a prince.
But first,
oh, he's still going, my bad.
Lae'zel, I need your promise. Call my dragons, Kulos and Kuthos, and ride to the Astral Sea. Destroy Vlaakith. Release our people. Be our future and our legacy.
He had sworn to Minthara that he would follow her into the Underdark. However, Lae'zel had just inherited 2 dragons. He finished off Orpheus before he had a chance to change his mind and gave the people of Faerûn one last Githyanki smirk. He would travel back to space. He would unite the Githyanki under one banner and claim Vlaakith's crown for himself. And that crown would sit atop a mane of genuine, luscious Githyanki hair. Githyanki hair that was real. Six months later, Twilight Eclipse received an invitation to a party and was told that all of his friends would be there. He couldn't make it in person because he didn't feel like it, so he used astral projection to send an image of himself and his hair from space. Bizarrely, the only guest in attendance was Minthara, who'd clearly just done a big shop.
I am surprised you dare face me, after departing as you did.
She seemed to be coping with the breakup quite well and had moved back home to rebel against a spider god. Twilight Eclipse noticed with quiet fury that she wasn't wearing pink.
This night shall be done sooner than any of us would like. I hope we meet again.
The feeling was not mutual.
For 2 months we trained the Knights of the Comet. For 2 more we skewered Kithraki bellies. And for 2 more yet we travelled through limbo.
He wasn't sure why Lae'zel was telling him this, as he'd been there the whole time. This was only the second party he'd ever been to, but the first one had been a lot more fun and full of goblins. He considered the branching paths in life that had brought him to this very moment. What might have happened if he had piercing blue eyes, or if he had secrets, or if he'd developed a misguided affinity for the arts? But there was no use in dwelling on such ideas. The past has already happened, and if something isn't happening, it doesn't matter. As Withers raised a glass, Twilight Eclipse joined him, safe in the knowledge that everything had worked out fine. And it always would.
I owe you thanks. The crown really is marvelous. I'm almost tempted to dig Karsus's soul out of whatever pit he's in, so I can show him what his creation is capable of. Now it's in the right hands. My legions are beginning their assault on Zariel's flying fortress just about now. It will fall before the sun rises over Toril, and Avernus will be mine. Conquering the other hells will be simplicity itself. Some of the archdevils are already making overtures of peace and promises of tribute. My dear father Mephistopheles is among them. Even he sees how the tide has turned. And with all 9 hells under my command, I will end the blood war. Inferna Victoria, and look for new worlds to conquer. It won't be long before I come knocking at your door. Ta-ta for now.
There is something unknown and unspeakable deep within your heart.